Yourself, Mr. Brooks, Mr. Watkins. So we're still missing a few.
Okay.
Give it just a few more minutes. Lubiano joining here. I received an email just a few minutes ago that some people were having trouble connecting publicly. They didn't elaborate on what the issues were, but we have over 50 public participants right now, so I think there just might be some issues on the user end that may be keeping them from getting in. So I've asked for an update, see what I can help advise with, so I'll try to be helping out with that once you get started with the open session again.
Lori here.
Hi, Lori. It looks like we're just missing a board member or two as we're coming back in from closed session. So we'll give it just another minute or two to have everybody join.
Hey, Christina, I hope we will have, should we have quorum? So yeah, 11:15, I got to leave as I told you before.
Right. Yep. We will have quorum.
I think you do it this time, Ms. Lawson. I've seen Dr. Gondev and Dr. Yip join, looking for Ms. Campaverde still.
Okay, is Ms. Campaverde the only person that's missing from our board besides Dr. Mahmood, who's not present today?
Dr. Thorpe just
Dr. Thorpe, I
joined.
see. Yep.
Yeah, I believe she is. Just scanning through the list real quick.
Okay, great. I think we'll go ahead and get started here. We are resuming back in open session, and we're now going to move on to agenda item 12, which is public comment on items not on the agenda. Just a reminder before I ask for public comments, for those making comments during this item, please do not discuss any pending complaints, pending license applications, or any pending disciplinary actions that may come before the board in the future for a decision. Such discussions would be considered ex parte communications, as they could provide information to members that is outside of the record in violation of the Administrative Procedure Act. Such discussions could create a conflict and could lead to a board decision being challenged in Superior Court. The board can receive public comments regarding the board's processes in general, but it cannot receive comments on specific case circumstances where a decision is still pending. In addition, the board requests the public to address the board as a whole and not individual members. And please be aware that public comment during this agenda item should provide information to the board members and is not intended to be a discussion between board members and the public. The only action that board members can take is to listen to comments and decide whether they want a future agenda item on the topic. No other action can be taken on the item at this meeting. Though this may seem at times like board members are not being responsive, following these guidelines is critical to ensure the rules of the Open Meeting Act are followed and to avoid compromising the speaker's goals or the board's mission. If you want to comment on an agenda item, please do wait until we get to that agenda item later this morning or afternoon. And comments at this time are only for items that are not on the board's agenda. Please do limit your comments to 3 minutes. Sean, you can open the Q&A feature and we can call for public comments now.
Thank you, Ms. Lawson. The Q&A window is open for anyone wishing to make a public comment. Just type anything in there. You don't have to actually type your comment, just any message in there and we'll call on you. You can also raise your hand, and for the call-in users, you can use *3 on your phone in order to toggle raising your hand via the phone. Just a reminder from yesterday, when we are called upon, a request will be sent to you. You have to actually accept the request to unmute on your side. We can't control it all from this side. We just send you the request and you have to unmute yourself. And for the call-in users, when you receive that prompt audibly on your phone, press *6 to unmute. So first up here, we have Susan Lawrence. Susan, let me send you the request. Should be seeing that on your screen, Susan.
Yes.
Your line's open. Please go ahead.
Good morning. I'm Susan Lauren, patient safety educator and activist. Consumer YT had a malpractice suit against Dr. X. The point of the surgery was to make her breast implant smaller due to pain she was having. According to plaintiff YT, she woke up with implants as big or bigger than she went in with. She had to get another surgery to replace the large implants Dr. X put in. Dr. Terry Dubrow, the IME on the case, went against the plaintiff. He said YT gained weight, thereby offsetting and masking the benefits of the surgery performed by Dr. X. I trust a woman to know if her breasts came out bigger than what she went in with. At least 50 women have claimed harm by this Dr. X. In 2015, my first lawyer told me I had to go see Terry Dubrow because he was hired as a witness for Saul Berger. I told him that multiple women I knew complained of harm done to them by Dubrow, and it would be abusive to make me go see him. My lawyer said, "You're not going to like any of these guys. If you want a trial, you have to go." The lawyer said, "Dubrow won't do a real exam. He's hired to say what the defense wants him to say. He will recommend a surgery you don't need to cap any possible restitution." And sure enough, Dubrow did not do a real exam and suggested surgery that has nothing to do with the assault Berger committed. Dubrow's dishonest suggestion is impossible anyway because Berger severely damaged my body and left many parts adhered to the underlying tissue. Your board enables Dubrow as your expert, and he makes thousands of dollars an hour as an IME. The injuries I sustained in Berger's surgical assault are so horrendous and easily apparent that even untrained laymen can see the assault could not be medically justified under any circumstances. Tom McAndrews sold Dubrow to my jury using Dubrow's status as a medical board expert as a reason to believe him. They do that in other cases with him. Dubrow lied profusely. He denied I'm in pain. He misidentified spider bites as surgery incisions. He acted like mutilation is normal. He described Berger's records as perfect when they are wrong from the first sentence in which he lied about my pre-assault breast size and weight. Berger's records read like fiction. There are even other women's medical records mixed in with mine. No one said a word about those. None of your newsletter tips would have protected the women who recently wrote one-star reviews about Saul Berger or Terry Dubrow. Those newsletter tips about trusting your instincts are going against a bandwagon effect of doctors and boards saying, no, these are good things. The medical board could have protected these women by stopping the dangerous doctors that victims like me have alerted you to. Okay, and the bad things happen thing, well, assault and cover-up is not just a bad thing. And my case was not handled right by the board, and it needs to be acknowledged and dealt with. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up, we have Helena Pappas. Helena, are you there? Should be seeing the request on your end. Okay. All right, we'll come back around to you, Helena. Next up, we have Denise Johnson. Denise, if you see there you go, your line is open. Please go ahead.
My name is Denise Johnson, and I live in Tracy. I'm a volunteer with Consumer Watchdog. My son, Richard, was a talented software specialist who died at the age of 25 from medical negligence. My son survived cancer, but was left to die from a treatable infection. My son was ignored, and treatment was withheld by his provider. Richard's death was completely preventable. When I filed my complaint with the medical board, I expected that his death would be taken seriously, but it was not. I was mistreated by an investigator who laughed at my son's death. Shortly after our conversation, my complaint was dismissed with a letter stating that the burden of proof of clear and convincing evidence could not be met. With no accountability for my son's death, I felt like he had died all over again. There was no accountability legally due to the medical negligence cap and through the regulatory board system due to the burden of proof and other laws that make it nearly impossible for Californians to hold their physicians accountable for a preventable death. I refuse to allow my son's death to be forgotten. I am here today to urge you to support and vote yes to move forward with legislation to change the burden of proof to preponderance of evidence for disciplinary actions. Your sunset review has shown you that you need to meet us halfway to provide Californians some consumer protections. The time is now. Vote yes to move forward to change the burden of proof from clear and convincing evidence to preponderance of evidence. I support Patients for Fairness, and I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you for your public comment. Going back to Helena.
Like a reminder to speakers that this comment period is for items not on the agenda. And so if your comment is related to the legislative proposals, if you can save them for that agenda item, it would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie. Helena, your line is open.
Yes, can you hear me now?
We can. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Helena Pappas. I'm continuing with my public comment from yesterday's meeting regarding the mismanagement of my complaint by the Medical Board and HQIU. My complaint was filed and closed in 2019. I may have misspoken yesterday and said 2018, but the correct year is 2019. My complaint was reopened and forwarded to HQIU in April 2020. Leadership from the Medical Board and HQIU have stated repeatedly during public meetings that once a complaint moves to the investigation stage, complainants are interviewed. This is not true. I had to call into the public meeting held on May 13th, 2021 to say I had never been interviewed by my investigator. The day after I made that public comment, the investigator emailed me to schedule the interview. During my phone interview, it was clear to me the investigator had still not reviewed key documents in my file. My investigator also allowed 2 scheduled interview dates for the doctor's interview, one in November 2020 and another in March 2021 to be postponed. She refused to give me an explanation why this crucial interview kept getting postponed. I just learned that the doctor was not interviewed until July 2021. My 3-year statute of limitations is coming up in just a matter of months. I have spoon-fed the information regarding my complaint to the Medical Board and to HQIU. I spoke with Jenna Jones 3 days ago to inquire about the status of my case, and she told me HQIU has not been able to find an expert to review my case. I was stunned. How is this even possible in light of the pending expiration of the statute of limitations and all my communications with the Medical Board over the past 2.5 years? I've been pleading with the investigator to interview the doctor since May 2020. The Medical Board's processes are assisting in the running of the statute of limitations. Kathleen Nichols called me last night after the meeting, and I want to thank her for her call. I look forward to working with Ms. Nichols to ensure my case is handled properly from now on. Ms. Nichols said she was sorry I didn't have a good customer service experience with the investigator. HQIU investigators are not customer service representatives. They are peace officers responsible for investigating serious allegations of patient harm. My investigator didn't fail to provide good customer service. She failed to perform her job duties. Thank you. This is the end of my public comment.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up, we have Hannah Ree. Hannah, let me find your line. Okay, Hannah, you should be receiving a prompt on your end to unmute. It's your computer. There you go, Hannah. Your line's now open.
Can you hear me?
Okay, Hannah, I believe you got multiple devices connected, something there creating a feedback loop in the background. I'll give you a minute to try to work that out there. Let's see. Apologies. Next up, we have Virginia. Virginia, I'm sending you the request now. Could you Accept that. There you go. Your line's open.
I can say it's very frustrating having another thing going on today and keep on getting delays in time. I jumped out of my other group at 10 o'clock thinking we'll resume at 10, and then it turned to 10:30, so I missed something very important during that time. And we're not supposed to talk about other things now, so I have to jump out again of this thing that's very important to talk about what I want to talk to, so this is very frustrating for me. So I'll talk about something else. There's a comment about not getting justice yesterday. We are very well aware we won't get justice due to the lobbying efforts of the CMA and the doctors company, who has accrued $6 billion with a B since the signing of MICRA. So we're well aware we won't get justice. Somehow we're supposed to make peace with this. Noting that the medical board provides licenses to these doctors that advocate against those harmed by medical errors. And they also appoint them to the medical board. Those who harm the people, the most vulnerable population. And this is why we think things are corrupt. And it's not only about justice, it's also about getting things fixed so it doesn't happen again. That's why we're here. We want things fixed so it doesn't happen again. And we need your help. We can't do it alone. When we say we want things fixed, like falsification of records, not letting people be surgically assaulted, not letting people bleed to death for 10 hours, and now another one bled to death for 5 hours. We don't want that to ever, ever, ever happen again. We need your help. And there's a difference between a complication and an error. A complication is something that would lead to a hemorrhage. An error, or more like negligent homicide, is letting that person bleed to death for 10 hours and doing nothing. Up to the 9-10 hours, nothing was done by that doctor. And he got like 6 years probation. He did nothing in that 10 hours. And surgical assault is not a complication. Surgical assault, if somebody was stabbed to death like Susan was in the street, they'd be in
30
jail.
seconds remain.
Instead, he still has his license, even though she was under sedation. Could you imagine going through that and then having to deal with all this and nobody standing up for her? And when you guys look at her, when she talks, it's like a stone wall. Your nonverbal communication
seconds remain.
speaks volumes. We want something done. Thanks.
Thank you for your public comment. Up next, I'm going to try to unmute Hannah Reed's line again. Hannah, you should be getting the request on your end to unmute.
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Much better, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you again for trying, to reach out. I apologize for the previous problems. So, medical board, this is Dr. Hannah Reed of Black Patients Matter. So, having been labeled as having a mental illness by design of the California Deputy Attorney General and racially ignorant, white privileged, board certified hired gun psychiatrist, along with the hearings office, which alters the court transcripts unsigned by the court stenographer, I would carry no credibility in demanding UC Regents to stop protecting tenured professor physicians who misuse their positions so as to manipulate, groom, and sexually assault subordinates so as to satisfy their own satisfy their own egos. The newly minted physician of color has no voice against white privileged tenured physicians and the UC system. Records of sexually deviant tenured UC physicians protected under some bizarre alternative pathway program strategized by the medical board must be made public to protect young doctors beginning their careers. and the patient population in which they serve. Thank you for allowing me to comment.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up here, we have Carrie Webb. Carrie, you should be seeing the prompt on your screen. Carrie, your line is open.
Hey, this is Carrie espoused her often incorrect interpretations of the law and said that people can use a pseudonym when signing into WebEx for the meetings. One, that is mentioned nowhere in the instructions when logging in. It requires your full name and email address not once, but twice. Further, the law is clear when it says the public shall not be required as a condition to attendance at a meeting to register his or her name, to provide other information, or otherwise to fulfill any condition precedent to his or her attendance. Did you get that part, Carrie? Fulfill any condition precedent to his or her attendance. That would include this morning I logged in using a pseudonym, Carrie Webb, and they booted me off. So clearly a pseudonym isn't going to work. Notice too that Christina said that they are to give their names before speaking, which also goes against the government code as well. You have to wonder about your own lawyer who often gets the law wrong at these meetings, just how often she's getting the law wrong in her daily job with the board. I have an email into the First Amendment Coalition to weigh in on this. I see a new video meme coming on Twitter featuring Carrie's own words, unless of course she wants to retract what she said. Of the board, they'll just go away with positive thinking, that if you just say that the reprimands aren't higher, they won't be. You treat the world and your own board members like they're fools and just sheep hanging on every word. You people, none of you, are any smarter or better than any of the rest of us. You're just normal people given a position to protect others. Your biggest problem is that many of you think it elevates you to a position of superiority and that you know better than the world. Christina's current big britches attitude is a great example of this. She sat on her hands most of the time she was just a regular board member, rarely ever speaking up. I called her on it a number of times. Now all of a sudden she's president of the board. She pulls out her big guns to impress people and is cutting down the very people that put her in that position. That's gratitude for you. Don't worry, Christina. I don't forget and I'm keeping track. What you do now will follow you long past your tenure on this board, I promise. This board ruined my life forever. I have nothing better to do than to make sure you're all held accountable appropriately, even if I fail. As I said yesterday, our community voice is growing stronger and louder, and together the advocates are making change for the first time in the century plus of this board. If you keep crossing us and not protecting us and then lying to us and saying that you are, we're just going to get louder and stronger. Stay tuned for the next LA Times article. It's sure to be a doozy. Christina, you can start advocating.
10 seconds remaining.
Again, I promise.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up, we have Rosie Arthur's daughter. Rosie, you should be getting the prompt on your side. Your line's open, Rosie.
Yes. Can you hear me?
We can. Please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. I have a lot to say, obviously not enough time to say it. Okay, but I have a very specific issue here. Yesterday in the presentation on the chronic pain, intractable pain guidelines, it was said that naturally we have to follow the guidance of the CDC. I'm wondering where that came from. California is a state, and the state medical board here sets those standards for this state. The guidelines that have been followed were not a large set of guidelines. They were a set of guidelines made for naive patients, not chronic pain patients, not intractable pain patients, not people with medical conditions that need particular prescribing, people with the inability to metabolize certain medications. So the only way that we know that there was a problem with this was when the CDPH sent across a notice for you, and you've published it, saying, don't fire your patients. And it made reference to the problems with the misapplication of this policy that you seem to have adopted and have it reaching over not only naive patients, but all patients in all domains of patient care. It was never meant for that. When the CDC rescinded this letter and explained that, whoa, you've taken this wrong, this has caused a lot of harm, you were silent. Not that you didn't know, not that people didn't speak up at meetings, because we did. There's absolutely no reason why, if you can publish the one from the CDPH, another state agency, you should at least be able to publish on your site and make it prominent that the CDC found a problem with that. And it meant that in 1 year, 49%, they said almost half, 49% of people had adverse events from the misapplication of this policy. And I dare say it's more than that, because it's not just naive patients for opioids, it's patients in every domain. Anyway, it would seem very logical for the board to publish that which the CDC sent to you. That would just be in the spirit of public policy. Thank you very much. And whatever time I have remaining, think about my dead son. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up, we have Denise Johnson. Denise, you should be seeing the prompt on your side.
Ms. Johnson already spoke.
That's my recollection too.
I thought I called on her, but I didn't get her to respond. But okay, I will go ahead and lower her hand. Next up, we have Sandra Perez. Sandra, you should be getting the prompt on your side. There you go, Sandra. Your line is open.
Good morning, Sandra Perez, Hesperia, California. I'm a patient safety advocate with the Fairness Act. First, based on yesterday evening's discussion and comments by Dr. Thorpe, I want to first offer him my condolences on the loss of his son. There is no greater pain one will ever bear than the loss of their child. With that said, Dr. Thorpe, your comments that sometimes bad things happen and doctors should not be held accountable were not well received by us patient advocates. Despite how well-meaning your intentions, statements to victims of medical negligence and medical malpractice by a board that seemingly does not protect patients can be misconstrued as we should accept our child's preventable death and move on without seeking accountability. Is this because the board knows they don't hold doctors accountable, or just that our complaints will have zero results anyway? This has me wonder if the board even investigates complaints, or rather moves them through a board policy process. I bring this up because about a year after I filed my complaints, I emailed Jenna Jones asking for status. Within a week, those complaints I inquired about were all subsequently closed. No reason, just closed. I suppose that is a status, but it gives the appearance that this board doesn't investigate anything, but just shuts down aggrieved parents. Did the board investigate my complaints? I will never know. Several months ago, in a legislative meeting for the appointment of these new board members, I recall Dr. Gnanadev told that legislative committee that all complainants are interviewed prior to a complaint closure. Either Dr. Gnanadev does not understand what his staff does, or he lied to the committee. I hope he wasn't lying. However, we were never interviewed. A number of advocates on this call state the same repeatedly every time we have meetings with you. But it can't be both ways. We can't be interviewed or never interviewed and be told to the legislature that we're always interviewed. This does need to be investigated. Dr. Gnanadev, you may believe it to be true, but it absolutely is not happening. And Dr. Thorpe, with your comment that doctors should not be held accountable, we will never know the answer to that. I filed complaints to find out. After all, that is your job, to investigate complaints. One that, based on comments presented at every one of these meetings, is abundantly clear that this board is either incapable or unwilling to do. And remember, it's not just one child who died. Her name is Jordan. Her name is Jesse. Her name is Demi. His name is Malachi. His name is Richard. The list continues to grow. Do better. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Up next, we have Tracy. Tracy, let me send you the request. Should be getting a prompt to open your line. Okay, Tracy, I'm going to move on to Marion Hollingsworth. Marion, you should be receiving the request on your side. There you go, Marion, your line is open.
Hello?
Yes, Marion, your line's open. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much. Good morning. My name is Marion Hollingsworth, patient safety advocate. I would like to comment on what Dr. Thorpe said yesterday regarding tragedies happening in medicine and that doctors don't necessarily need to be disciplined. What you don't understand is that the people who seek help from you have suffered greatly. The vast majority of complaints are for egregious harm or death, and most of the time the doctors get off, as you know. When I was in television news, the consultants told us that for every person who calls in to write, to complain about something or someone, 100 other people feel the same way. So when you claim that the number of complaints is down, you don't really have any idea of how many other harmed people or families are too broken to try to file a complaint and go through the 3 years it takes to resolve a case. It's rather mind-boggling that the quote from Dr. Thorpe is eerily similar to the quote that Dr. Lewis made about a year ago. They both use the same terms like tragedies in medicine, bad things happen, and claiming that doctors don't necessarily need to be disciplined when bad things happen. Dr. Thorpe's comments were more tactful, but still his words stung and made us realize how much the board protects doctors. Yesterday, I brought up a DUI case as an example of how you appear to favor doctors, especially ones who seem to be well connected. Going before the board should make doctors fearful, much worse than being called to the principal's office. If nothing else, it should make them more careful. They shouldn't expect to get a clap on the back and a wink wink when disciplines are negotiated. If you want the public to have a better opinion of the board, you should urge members not to belittle the suffering of patients and families by declaring that, in the words of Dr. Lewis, we can't hang everybody. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up, I'm going to try Tracy again. Tracy, you should be getting the prompt on your side. There you go, Tracy. Your line is open.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. Also, my condolence to Dr. Thorpe. But the comment that you said that things just happen. These kind of comments are why the public finds it hard to have faith in this board. To the families who have lost a daughter, a son, a grandson, a wife, a husband, deserve to be heard. It's a life. It's our life. Also, our loved ones who didn't receive the protection they deserved from the California Medical Board. This board neglected to protect our daughters, our sons, grandsons, wives, and husbands. The board's priority, and I say priority, is to protect a life. It has to be your priority as a California board member to protect patients. If it's not your priority, then you shouldn't be on this board. Remember, the holidays are here, and we are the families that have the empty chair at our table due to the medical negligence and no protection from this board. I will continue to be my daughter's voice and my grandson's voice, and for many families, so that there will be no more empty chairs from lack of protection from this California Medical Board. Please try to remember our families during this season. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up, we have Michelle Montserrat Ramos. Michelle, let me send you the request. Okay, Michelle, check your computer. If you will come back around to you, let me go to Alicia Cole. Alicia, you should be seeing the request on your side to come off mute. There you go, Alicia. Your mic is open.
Yes. Hi, I'd like to just give a brief comment on the comment made yesterday. It's very hurtful, and it goes to the heart of the bias and the stereotype against patients that seems to be a pervasive attitude with many doctors and people who sit on this board. Patients are seen as the angry patient, the irate families. And what you have to understand is patients and families that have been harmed, survived medical harm, or lost loved ones, we start out as the sad patient, the sad family, the scared family. It's not until you can't get answers, the wall of secrecy goes up. Medical records have missing, pages. You can't get documents. You can't get answers. You're treated as an outsider at your most vulnerable time. And so I would like each of you to remember and consider the fact that people come to you because they have been experiencing these hurtful, vindictive, conscious efforts to limit liability and protect doctors who are often harming more than one patient in a facility that already knows it has a problem or a broken system or a problem doctor, and yet they still circle the wagons and try to protect those people. Patients can forgive an honest mistake. We can understand the humanity of healthcare. We want that same consideration. But what we can't forgive and what we don't accept and what we won't tolerate is cover up and lies and missing information and altering of documents. And we won't accept you belittling us and stereotyping us with your own biases, labeling us. When we get to the step of coming to the medical board, it's because it's the last stage we have to get some sort of answers, to get some sort of justice we are hoping for, to get your power to get the missing medical records, to get people to answer questions that they won't answer. So please stop seeing
30
us
seconds
as
remain.
angry, as the enemy. You are there with a fiduciary duty to protect people who have been harmed, and then added insult to injury, salt thrown into the wound, missing records, bad treatment. Please give some compassion and understanding when
10
people come
seconds remain.
before you. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. I'm going to attempt to open Michelle Montserrat Ramos' line again. You should be receiving that prompt on your end, Michelle. Okay, Michelle's saying she's not receiving a prompt on her hand. I'm going to go ahead and try something here. Michelle, I've moved you into a different role where you should be able to freely unmute yourself. If you can just hit the unmute button at the bottom of your screen there. At the bottom of the WebEx screen, there would be an unmute button. There you go, Michelle.
Can you hear me?
We can. Please go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Michelle Montserrat Ramos, and I am with Consumer Watchdog. I've been actively participating and monitoring your meetings for the past 16 years. I can say that there have been a few times throughout the years when a board member made comments that did not sit well with the public. Unfortunately, yesterday was one of those days. Dr. Thorpe, I also offer you my condolences on the loss of your son. I can do this because I was raised by good people who taught me about life and death and to honor others. I can also say in the 16 years that I've been offering public comment in person and virtually, only one person, your board president, has offered their condolences to me. Doctor, the statement you made that sometimes children die, sometimes children have complications, etc., was outlandish. This is exactly how the LA Times described how this board treats the public, and you confirmed it. To insinuate that any of the advocates or members of the public would spend their time in these meetings without real complaints of gross negligence is outrageous. A friendly recommendation: I would not second guess the advocate moms on my team. They have lost their children. They have lost everything. You talk about the hours that burned out physicians put in. You have no idea the hours that the advocate moms on my team put into their advocacy work. I receive their texts and messages at 1:30 in the morning and 6 in the morning. I take their Friday night phone calls and texts over the weekend. They work 7 days a week, 24 hours a day to make change for Californians. They are the brave and courageous. They already lost their families. It is now their mission and their purpose in honor of their families to make change here. They are here to make positive change. They won't stop. They are here for change. Our hope is that you will join the rest of the board with us to make positive change for consumers. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Go ahead and move this back real quick. Okay, next up we have Tammy Smith. Tammy, let me go ahead and send you the request. You should be seeing a request there on your end to open your line, to unmute your line. Tammy, if you're there, you can accept the request. Okay, let me. Tammy, I've moved you into the role where you can unmute yourself there as well too. Down at the bottom of the WebEx screen, there is a mute button. Even if it looks like to you like you're unmuted, just hit it and it will toggle your microphone off. There you go, Tammy, your line is open.
Oh, perfect. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Yeah, I too would like to share my condolences to Dr. Thorpe. No parent should ever have to suffer the loss of a child. It is an excruciating pain. However, the comment, sometimes children die. It's very painful to those of us who have lost a child due to medical negligence. My son, Alex, not only did he die, but he was killed by a negligent doctor. And the Medical Board of California let that doctor off with a public reprimand, little more than a slap on the wrist for taking the life of my son. I filed a complaint and I waited 4 long years to find out how this board would fail me and fail my son. There was no justice and no accountability for Alex's death. That doctor continues to practice today, unscathed by this board. Alex was given a lethal combination of medications in the hospital, and then he was left unmonitored for more than 7 hours to die alone. He was found dead in his hospital bed during morning rounds, already in rigor mortis. The coroner's report showed that Alex died due to acute polydrug intoxication. In other words, he was drugged to death by his doctor. And when this doctor is allowed to continue practicing, because the Medical Board of California chose to not adequately discipline this doctor, revoke his license, do something to cause change, they're allowing Californians, they're allowing patients to continue to be put at risk by a dangerous doctor. And it's just appalling. And I would just urge that this board look at these cases, look at all of us who are reaching out to you, who are sharing our stories. We've lost our children. We've lost our loved ones. We have been harmed. Our family members have been harmed. And we need you to do your job. We need you to do your job and to properly discipline these dangerous doctors. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. It's back here. And next up, we have Sharon Washington. Sharon, you should be getting the prompt on your end. There you go. Your line is open. Please proceed. Sharon, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, my name is Sharon Washington, and this is my first time attending one of these, but I do want to comment on the comment that was made yesterday about how things happen. It is very disheartening, especially me being a first time on, hearing that the very people that we go to in these dire situations have taken on the perspective of things just happen. And so if every time y'all are looking through our cases, that's the mindset, then of course we're never going to see justice. And unfortunately, in April of 2019, I had to sit and watch my brother plead and beg for his life. 29-year-old male who had a 0.01 white blood cell count and was allowed to sit in the ER for 8 hours while his lungs actively filled with blood, and him pleading and begging for his life, and doctors doing nothing until he died. And my brother had a baby on the way that he will never get a chance to meet, never get a chance to hug, hold, or share a father-daughter dance with. And not only did I have to witness it, and now I'm suffering PTSD and memory loss, I had to look my mother in her eyes and tell her that her only son is gone and have no answer for her. And we've received 3 different stories from doctors. We've had missing pages from our medical records as well. And it's been almost 2 years now, and we still don't know why Sean was left to die, why nobody cared for him, and why nobody decided to treat him and literally allowed him to sit there and choke on his own blood. And I just, as a sister, that is something that nobody should witness ever in their lifetime, is to watch a loved one beg and plead for their life, and then to get on a medical board call and hear doctors referencing how children just die or these things just happen. These things happen because you all have allowed them to happen and be swept under the rug, and it needs to stop today. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. At this time, I do not see any additional requests in queue.
Thanks, Sean, and thank you to all those who joined us for public comment today. We appreciate hearing your comments. We're going to move on to agenda item 13, which is discussion and possible action on legislation and regulations. And that is Mr. Bone with the staff report, I believe.
There we go. That's better. Thank you and good morning, Madam President and members. Aaron Bone, I'm the Chief of Legislation and Public Affairs. This is item 13A, which is a discussion of the implementation of the bills that the board took a position upon and were signed into law by the governor last month. The tracker list before you in the meeting materials includes all the bills that are alive and that the board has a position. The bills in green are those signed into law, and those in blue are 2-year bills, which may be further considered by the legislature next year. I will now go briefly through each bill signed into law and then take questions and comments from the members. The first is Assembly Bill 356, which authorizes the California Department of Public Health, or CDPH, to issue a one-time temporary permit authorizing certain healthcare professionals to use fluoroscopic X-ray equipment. The board supported this bill. We frequently receive requests from CDPH to provide information to our licensees about their programs, and I expect that we will in time receive a similar request to provide application and programmatic information to our licensees. In addition, as noted in the analysis, information about this new law will be included in the board's newsletter. Next is AB 359. which clarifies the options for out-of-state physicians to obtain a license in California and adds specified subjects to the list of courses that a licensee may take to meet their continuing medical education or CME requirements. The board was neutral on this bill. Board staff are working to update the relevant information on our website, train staff on these changes, and include information about this new law in our newsletter. Moving on to SB 310, this bill creates a pilot program to allow for the recycling of cancer medications, certain cancer medications. The bill allows up to 50 qualifying physicians to be involved in this program and for them to accept and redistribute certain unused cancer medications to their patients. The program will be administered by a licensee of the Board of Pharmacy. The medical board supported this bill. I recently reached out to both the Board of Pharmacy and the bill sponsors for information about the timing and related implementation details for this program, and I'm still awaiting response from them. Coordinating with those entities may be helpful for potential outreach efforts in the future once this program comes online. In the meantime, staff will discuss this law in our newsletter and inform enforcement staff in case future complaints down the road come to the board. Finally, we have Senate Bill 806, which is the board sunset bill, as I know you're all very familiar with. There are, of course, numerous provisions of this new law and many new elements to implement. Staff have already completed the programming necessary to implement the increased licensing and renewal fees. The board's IT staff worked diligently with DCA to update Breeze on an expedited basis to limit delays amongst those whose licenses expire during the first quarter of 2022, ensuring that those licensees have ample time to renew their licenses at the new fee amount. Staff are developing a web page specific to SB 806 that will provide summary level information about the law and include links to other portions of the website with various details of, for example, information about the changes to licensing requirements. More information about the implementation plans for SB 806 are discussed in the analysis, but some highlights include that the enforcement program is developing cost accounting procedures and training staff related to our restored cost recovery authority. Licensing unit is working on website and form changes, staff training and outreach to postgraduate training programs and applicants to inform them of the various licensing changes and respond to questions. And staff are working with DCA on a possible new fee study that we expect will continue to demonstrate the board's need for further fee increases and establish positive cash flow and rebuild the board's reserve fund. With that, Madam President, I'm happy to take any questions or comments about these bills and the implementation plans.
Thank you, Mr. Bone. Are there any questions or comments from board members? All right, seeing none, I think that perhaps we'll open this up to the public now to see if there are any public comments on this item. This is not an action item for us, but the next one, maybe 13B may very well be, and I think I'd like to separate out the two.
Sounds good.
For comments. So Sean, if we could open up the public comment line, see if there's any comments. And this is just specific to the implementation plan. So we will be getting to the 2022 legislative proposals next. I know there's some interest. I've already seen it in the Q&A in talking about that, but this will just be limited to these items Aaron just provided the report on.
Thank you. The Q&A window is open for anyone wishing to make a public comment. You can type something in there or raise your hand. If anyone on a call-in only line would like to make a public comment, you can press *3 to raise your hand. First up here, we have Rosie Arthur's-daughter. Rosie, you should be getting the prompt on your end.
Thank you. Well, my comment is on AB 359 regarding the CME. Now, I know that this is problematic because so many of the CMEs out there have varying quality. And particularly in the area of pain management, they tend to be offered in such a way as to promote one particular modality as opposed to the entire spectrum of pain management. And when a person is holding themselves out to be treating pain management or appropriately referring a person to pain management, the type of training that they receive in these CME courses, I think needs to be looked at very, very carefully. Because if we have people who are getting trained and taking the training in good faith, and perhaps the trainer has a different attitude or is promoting a particular modality to the exclusion of all aspects of pain, we're, cutting off our nose to spite our face. We need to make sure that the CME that's out there and is required for a reason, to make sure that it is actually doing what it is supposed to do. Because I hear time and time again that they are following the board's policy and they are following something else. Oftentimes, instead of following the policies of the board or the statutes or the appropriate guidelines, oftentimes they are following the advertising content media spokesperson's idea of what promotes their particular product or their client's product. And therefore, we have people thinking that they're following the law or providing good care, when in fact they are just a victim of some media scam. So I think there has to be something that goes, CME is meant to be providing quality assurance. And it
30
seems
seconds
to
remain.
be, it seems to be more promoting a particular product or modality to the detriment of the patient's options. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Madam President, I just thought it would be helpful for the speaker, Ms. Arthur's as well as for the board, that this bill, AB 359, had very specific new CME offerings that are going to be authorized under the law, which pertain to practice management, use of technology, clinical office workflows, how to manage a care facility, coding and reimbursement, as well as educational methodologies for physicians who teach in a medical school. So just wanted to add that context as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bone. Sean, the next commenter, please.
Next up, we have Hannah Ree. Hannah, you should be getting a prompt on your screen.
Black Patients Matter here. I just wanted to suggest that perhaps it would be nice to receive a notice of some sort via email from the medical board about implementation of legislation so that we can discuss it on our weekly podcast. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up, we have Marion Hollingsworth. Marion, let me get your line open. Okay, Marion, you should be getting a prompt on your end.
Hello. Can you hear me?
We can. Please go ahead.
All right, thank you. Good morning. My name is Marion Hollingsworth, patient safety advocate. I would like to encourage you to support SB 310 to recycle cancer medications. When my husband was suffering from GIST cancer, we were told the monthly cost for the first medication he was given would be the Medicare copay of $2,600 per month. At the time, that was more than 3 times the cost of our mortgage. We were struggling with how to pay for that since some people are on Gleevec for years. We were thinking of buying it abroad or even selling our house. Fortunately, he did qualify for a special, so we didn't have to face that. But for a while, it was extremely stressful dealing with not only the diagnosis, but how do we pay for the medicine to keep him alive? When he did pass, we had a full sealed bottle of another medication named Quinlock. If unused safe medications can be given back to the cancer center or oncologist, patients who can't afford such high prices could get the treatment they need without going broke. Please support SB 310. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Check one more time here. Okay, that is the last comment in queue.
Thanks, Sean. We will bring this back to the board, and it's not an action item here, so we will move on to agenda item 13B, which to the 2022 legislative proposals. You do have a staff report, of course, in the packet that has been provided. And Mr. Bone, I will turn it over to you to go over these proposals. Then we'll take some public comment, and then we'll bring it back to the board for a conversation.
The paper for this item starts with a recap of the proposals from the board in its 2020 sunset report. Flip to that myself. And as including also the amendments to SB 806 that were not included in the final version of that bill. Unless the board directs staff otherwise, those items noted in that first section of the analysis will continue to be the legislative priorities for the board next year. Moving on to the new proposals, I'll start with the enforcement-related topics. Actually, I'm going in order as it's reflected on the memo. The first is to change the evidentiary standard or burden of proof. The standard that must be followed by the medical board, as well as other boards within the Department of Consumer Affairs, to discipline a licensee is clear and convincing proof to a reasonable certainty. For most allopathic medical boards in other states and territories, the standard generally is preponderance of evidence, which is typically defined as evidence that shows it is more likely than not that a fact is true. The burden of proof correlates to the volume and type of evidence that is generally required of the board to prove its case before an administrative law judge or for a panel decision to survive judicial review if it were to be challenged by a licensee in Superior Court. Making this change would place California in line with most of the nation and is generally expected to make our investigations and prosecutions less difficult, less time-consuming, and less expensive to complete. The next proposal relates to the petitions for reinstatement and penalty relief. The memo describes the current wait times that a petitioner must abide by when they wish to file a petition with the board for reinstatement or to have a change in the terms of their probation. The approval rate of the petition types described in the memo hover around 50%, yet the board faces substantial direct costs to consider those petitions. As noted in the analysis, just for petitions for reinstatement in the prior fiscal year, the board spent about $155,000 in litigation services from the Attorney General's office. Following the publishing of this analysis, I learned that the board spent about $120,000 on those same petitions for costs related to the Office of Administrative Hearings, for a total of approximately $275,000. And those costs just described are only for a portion of the petitions that we receive and adjudicate. In response, staff have provided a couple of options for board consideration. The first would be to increase the amount of time a petitioner must wait after being disciplined to file their petition. I would note that the current wait timeframes in law often exceed the amount of time that the board requires to investigate, prosecute, and impose discipline. And there are some potential new timeframes indicated on page 13B-3. The additional proposal on this topic is to pursue authority to establish an application fee that would cover the board's reasonable costs to process and adjudicate these petitions. Next is to require the earlier exchange of expert testimony information. Under current law, this information must be exchanged within 30 days of the originally scheduled hearing date. Staff proposed increasing that to 90 days, which would allow additional time to prepare for hearing. This change is expected to support the timely resolution of cases by reducing necessary delays that occur when additional time is required to review potentially voluminous documentation from the expert witnesses hired by opposing counsel. The next proposal would require additional reports to the board of potential physician misconduct. The analysis discusses the example of George Tyndall, a former physician who was employed as an OBGYN at the University of Southern California. Tyndall was terminated from his position at USC through a human resources pathway rather than through a peer review body. Therefore, USC was under no obligation to report the circumstances surrounding his termination to the board. Before the members are a few options intended to increase the board's awareness of possible physician misconduct through mandatory reporting. The first would extend to medical groups, health insurance providers, healthcare service plan providers, and locum tenens agencies the current requirement to report written sexual misconduct allegations to the board. The second would require organizations that employ physicians to report to the board any employment-related discipline imposed on a physician due to a medical disciplinary cause or reason. The related idea shown in the sub-bullet below that would require those that contract with the physician or other organization to provide physician services to report to the board when a physician is dismissed from service or that contract is terminated due to a medical disciplinary cause or reason. And there's a definition of that provided in the analysis. Next is a proposal to require patient records be maintained for at least 7 years. This time frame corresponds with the law that generally requires the board to file an accusation within 7 years of the date of the alleged act or omission. The final enforcement proposal would authorize the board to provide a consumer a copy of their personal records obtained by the board during an investigation. Currently, the board may only provide copies of records to a consumer that we obtain from that same consumer. This proposal would help those who are unable to obtain their own records from a health professional or facility. Those consumers could have them for their personal use, including reviewing them for possible discrepancies or alterations by a provider or facility. That concludes the enforcement proposals, Madam President. And next, I'll move on briefly to the licensing proposals, which I would just preface with are intended to be technical amendments that would clarify some of the licensing changes made by SB 806. The first is to clarify in Business and Professions Code section 2096A that applicants for a physician and surgeon license may participate in postgraduate training outside California. The second would clarify the licensing requirements for those who obtained some postgraduate training outside California and then are accepted to a training program here in the state. BPC section 2065G provides a deadline to obtain their physician and surgeon license if they receive credit for 12 months of approved training, which applies to those who graduated from a U.S. or Canadian medical school. Staff proposed to clarify this code section so that it also applies to applicants who have credit for 24 months of postgraduate training. This would be because they graduated from an international medical school. The third item there is intended to update the mechanism by which the board can extend the deadline for a licensee to demonstrate that they have received credit for 36 months postgraduate training at the time of their first license renewal. Staff proposed to amend BPC section 2097 to require physicians to provide proof that they have received credit for at least 36 months of board-approved training before the end of their second year of licensure. Consistent with the current wording of this section, the board may grant an additional 60 days to the initial license expiration date. This minor change would allow board staff to automate the process to grant all such applicants a 60-day extension through Breeze. Under the current structure of the law, licensing staff would be required to apply those extensions through a manual process. So we're just changing the mechanism by which that extension would occur, not the fact that it would occur or not. The final proposal would simplify the language in BPC section 2097 that pertains to the licensing requirements for applications in an oral or maxillofacial surgery program. It would clarify that when licensees from this specialty program renew their physician and surgeon license for the first time, that they must demonstrate that they've received credit for 36 months of total postgraduate training, including at least 24 months credit in a combined dental medical degree program accredited by the Commission on Dental Accreditation. With that, Madam President, I think we are ready for public comments.
Thank you, Mr. Bone. Are there any, I just like to ask the board members if there are any technical questions about any of these before we go out for public comment. Mr. Watkins?
Yes, I have a question about adding more proposals. Is that okay?
Yes, so we'll talk about that. I was going to invite the public to provide their own ideas, and then we'll invite board members as well to provide their own ideas. Thank you.
Ms. Howard, I have a question about the evidentiary standard.
Sure.
Aaron, is that proposal exclusively for the medical board or all of the boards in California?
Thank you, Doctor. Yes, we're only thinking about our own board. That would be a much bigger proposal to impact the rest of the boards as well as other potential bodies outside of consumer affairs that may rely upon that evidentiary standard.
Thank you.
Question.
Please.
Regarding the proposal to require employers to report all employment-related discipline, I'm not sure what we're trying to achieve here. That seems a little overbroad to me. Discipline can include things like counseling, letter of expectations, perhaps withholding bonuses. Are we asking that any discipline be reported, or just say suspension or termination?
So, Doctor, we're talking about proposals. Excuse me. We're aiming at issues that pertain to what are called medical disciplinary. Trying to find the right term. Medical disciplinary causes or reasons, and there's a definition of that which is already in current law, and it's noted in the bottom of page 13B-4. And that's defined as that aspect of a licensee's competence or professional conduct that is reasonably likely to be detrimental to patient safety or to the delivery of patient care. And there was a discussion, when with regard to Tyndall, there was a hearing in 2018 before the legislature where kind of went through a number of the issues was specific to, to that individual, and he had I believe a teaching position, or he was at a post-secondary educational institution, and there was discussion of, well, if you have complaints pertaining to your teaching or things that are clearly outside of the scope of their work as a physician, or matters that are unrelated to their professional competence or professional conduct. That's really not what we're talking about. We're talking to those things that are reasonably likely to be detrimental to patient safety or their delivery of care. Does that help, Doctor?
It does. I certainly agree that allegations of sexual misconduct should be reported by the employer, but I'm concerned that this language might require even a simple counseling discussion to be reported.
Yeah, I'd like to just table this conversation, and then let's get public input, and we'll come back and we'll talk about all these details and about what proposals we'd like to advance or what changes we would like to make.
Thank you.
Any other clarifying questions at this point? Okay, Sean, if you could open up the public line for comments on these legislative proposals that, of course, our staff has advanced in the staff report, and that we just heard from Mr. Bone about. And frankly, we invite the public to articulate any ideas they have, you all have for legislative proposals as well.
Alicia Cole, who had indicated earlier she wanted to speak on 13B, trying to.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Alicia.
Okay, thank you. I didn't realize I was going to go first, but I thank you. Yes, so I would like to take my time actually to use my case as a case study on how this standard of proof, this burden of proof, clear and convincing, which is a lot more difficult, has been harmful to patients and inhibited the medical board in also doing their job for over a decade. I've been monitoring the medical board since 2007. And just to give you a history, I went into the hospital to have surgery in August of 2006 and ended up subsequently being hospitalized for 2 months, having 7 additional surgeries, 9 blood transfusions, almost having my left leg amputated, left the hospital with an open abdomen for 3.5 years, and had a decade of weekly doctor appointments and aftercare from then on. In 2007, we wrote our first letter to the medical board when we couldn't get all of our medical records, couldn't get questions answered. Subsequently, the CMS investigators cited my hospital for being in violation of 15 federal and state laws. And there were questions about some of the doctors' behaviors as well. In September of 2007, wrote a letter to Barbara Johnston, then executive director of the medical board, never heard anything back. Friends and family began a letter writing campaign, 75 to 100 letters. No response from the medical board. October of 2008, wrote another letter to the executive director of the medical board. Then again, a letter writing campaign of over 100 letters. October of 2008, wrote to Renee Threadgill. No response from the medical board. Finally, before she retired, County Supervisor Yvonne Brathwaite Burke got involved. Senator Barbara Boxer got involved. In August of 2010, we wrote another letter writing campaign. And finally, at the end of 2010, the Medical Board of California decided to do an investigation. In January of 2011, 5 years later, I finally had a face-to-face with an investigator. During that conversation, while we sat at my kitchen table and I pulled out documents, she said, "What is that?" And I said, "Oh, these are some missing pages that came from the Department of Health and Human Services Office of Civil Rights as a HIPAA violation."
30 seconds remain.
What I want to say is my investigation was put into what I was told is a frozen state, because despite all the documentation that was provided by federal investigation, what we had did not meet the standard of proof of clear and convincing, even though federal investigators had provided a lot of the documentation after all that time. And I was
10 seconds
told,
remain.
if I got any more evidence, please let us know. The medical board investigator told me that half the time the doctors don't provide what they're asked for. They don't even show up for.
Thank you for your public comment. Up next, we have Kathleen Nichols. Kathleen, let me send you the request. There you go, Kathleen. Your line is open.
Deputy Chief with the Health Quality Investigation Unit. I just wanted to support the board's efforts to obtain legislation to improve our processes, specifically with respect to reducing the burden of proof in the disciplinary cases, and also the proposal to increase the mandatory reports of physician misconduct, because there's a lot of games going on with the facilities not reporting things to the board under the 805 section by deliberately skirting the process so that they don't have to report. I also wanted to support under your item number 1 for items that were not included in SB 806. One of the things the board had requested that didn't make it in the bill was tolling the statute of limitations when we do not receive the records. And this is especially important because facilities and doctors' offices are deliberately withholding records, knowing that it will delay our cases. And there have been several cases where there's not enough time left on the statute of limitations. So I strongly support that. I would like to request that in the language we add that the matter be told once the subpoena is lawfully served. That's when our clock should stop then. If they're not going to produce the records. And then I had 2 additional proposals I'd like to recommend. One's with respect to physician participation in interviews. We do have a section 2234G that was amended recently to remove the word repeated failure. So now it says failure to cooperate absent good cause. The real issue is, what is good cause? So now what we get is the subject's attorneys are in trial. They're not available for 3 or 4 months. Our cases continue to get delayed. It's sometimes taking up to a year to interview physicians. And while I understand that we can't spell out every situation, there should be some language added to put a time frame within 30 days, within 60 days, whatever is agreed upon by the stakeholders, but we need something to make the section enforceable. And the last proposal I would like the board to consider is biological fluid testing for impairment cases. Currently, even with reasonable suspicion thresholds, we are unable to require a physician to give a sample. We have to ask, and they have the right to say no. And especially when doctors know they are impaired, they will not agree to give a sample, costing us valuable time and potential harm to patients. Many other professions, including my own, require submission of a biological fluid sample when there's reasonable suspicion that that you are impaired, and this should be a condition of licensure. So I implore you to consider these proposals in your discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up, we have Hannah Ree. Hannah, let me send you the request. Okay, Hannah, you should be receiving a request on your end.
Yes, thank you. Black Patients Matter here. Look, first of all, why is the HQIU, otherwise known as the corrupt police force, the ones who target physicians of color, why are they calling in? Couldn't their comments be utilized in a different avenue? This is for patient advocates. I understand they're patient advocates, but it's like having the police call in to complain about how they're not able to be police or something. I mean, this is not the avenue for them. So I'm really shocked to see that we're spending so much time allowing them to speak when we know that they racially profile physicians who treat Black patients. So also, I just want to say that I certainly support mandatory reporting of physician misconduct, especially sexual misconduct. The time for UC San Diego to stop protecting their physicians who target young physicians and threaten them and sexually assault them in order to satisfy their own egos. That kind of stuff needs to be reported and in a way that doesn't intimidate the young physicians. And also, please, medical board, as you know, we've been requesting for many years now for you all to require medical experts and medical consultants that are hired by the medical board to have significant work history in promoting diversity and racial and religious tolerance. Okay, so we believe that is a central problem to patient care, and that the medical experts being utilized by California's medical board have no history of treating a diversified patient population. In fact, if you look very closely at their CVs, most of them have only treated white patients, for lack of a better description. So please consider that clause. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Up next, we have here Susan Lauren. Susan, let me find your line. Okay, Susan, you should be getting a prompt on your end. There you go.
Hi. First of all, I want to say that I like some of the things that you're considering, and I appreciate that. I'd like to add three separate things. One is, as you know, of course, the first thing I'm going to talk about is some kind of law for plastic surgeons and those who do plastic surgery. And I'm focused on the liposuction code 1356.6, which I know very well. And it's really a problem for, I mean, I've been studying this daily for 10 years. It's really a problem for the safety of consumers in California. I've given suggestions, but I just don't want to see us wait any longer. You know, it just broke my heart that seeing learning about these 3 more women's deaths. And I know that there's a spectrum of harm. It doesn't go from a perfect thing to a death. And I'm on the far end of the harm spectrum. And so, you know, please, let's do something like this now. I really do have good information, and I'm just here for that. Like, I'm sorry, I know I got to get moving on time-wise, but like, Sahlberger used a power tool on me. I was as fit and healthy as could be. I had some loose skin, and I went in for a conservative breast reduction. He used a power tool that he used by reading instructions out of a box. I learned that from his deposition. He told me that he learned his skills at USC. Now, I don't think any of you would want to be in that position to, and what he did, the amounts that he took and the areas that he worked on was assault. And this just never should happen to anyone. And I think that we can put into a code things that will hopefully lessen, hopefully stop this. Please consider this. Number 2, the medical records, I like where you're going with it. One thing I want to say is, in order to prevent harm, the best thing that I can see is co-authored records to begin with, because if I had seen any of the things that the bad doctors had written, I would not have moved forward with what they were doing. And in fact, just like I said, Sahlberger wrote the wrong information on my breast size, which was a 32G. He wrote that I was a 32D, which is what I said. I don't want to be smaller than that afterwards. If you've got a surgeon doing breast reduction and he can't get the breast size right, so I really think patient-approved records. The last thing, since I don't have time, is the sexual misconduct thing. One of the bad doctors, I want to tell you guys about another time, but he told me that he would not give me the sleep medication that I needed. I only needed sleep medication because of what Saul Berger did to me. He wouldn't give it to me unless I told him
10
details
seconds
about oral sex and other things. That guy should not be working, but I couldn't move forward with the complaint because you didn't do anything about the surgical battery. So how are you going to listen to me about anything? And there should be a hotline to call for this guy should not be working. And right now his son is up on a complaint.
Thank you for your public comment. Up next, we have Monique Himes. Monique, you should be getting a request on your side. Monique, your line's open.
I'm sorry, could you hear me?
We can. Please go ahead.
Okay. My name is Monique Himes, and I am from Bakersfield. I'm a volunteer with Consumer Watchdog and the Fairness Act. My grandson suffered medical negligence, with his mother and independent of his mother. He fought so hard, but lived for only 18 hours. When we tried to file a complaint, we were discouraged from doing so. The current standard of proof has allowed this doctor to continue to harm and be linked to the deaths of mothers and babies in Bakersfield for the past 25 years. You have the opportunity to save other mothers and babies now. I urge you to support and vote yes to move forward with the legislation to change the burden of proof to preponderance of evidence. I support Patients for Fairness. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. I see people entering multiple Q&A entries too for public comment. Just please let you know I'm just going in the orders that I see them in here. If you've commented once, we will call on you, so you don't have to keep typing in messages in there. Next up, we have Virginia. Virginia, you should be getting the prompt on your side.
Hello again. I really appreciate these bills. My problem with it is we see the CMA override the bills and vote over them and lobby against them. So you put all this work into these bills that are needed only to have the CMA overdo them and overwrite what you guys vote for. This is highly concerning to me. And if you're going to go through all this work, we need a bill to see the impact of the CMA on patient safety. And we need to start there. And if their impact on patient safety is significant, there needs to be laws to prevent their lobbying against patient safety. If they put as much money into lobbying for patient safety as they do against patient safety, we wouldn't be where we are now. That needs to be addressed, or none of this other stuff is going to matter, because when it goes through legislation, they're going to turn it all down, just like they did the other bills. So you have to start there. That's the root. That's the starting ground. If you don't start there, none of this good work is going to matter. You're going to waste your time, you're going to waste your energy, and people are still going to die. So that's your starting point. Second is prevention. We need a bill on prevention. We have all this technology in California. How can we use this technology to prevent medical errors from happening in the first place? Also, you idolize this poor doctor in your thing for scholarships. She's literally working herself to death, seeing all these patients and working a 24-hour NICU. That should be a bill that people can't work like that. For standard of care, for what do you do when you're exhausted? I think about my patients and not myself. That's how people end up in trouble. That's how babies end up dead. Is that article in the record? So you need a bill on health and wellness and physician self-care and not working themselves to death. We need a hotline to call in for help. I tried for 3 years for a surgical emergency and I couldn't get help. I needed a number to call in the middle of that. There's nowhere to call. And falsification records, if I didn't say that. And it's really concerning the health investigation
30 seconds remain.
unit sees these concerns. And we as patients don't know these concerns. We think we're all alone in this until we're not. We need that addressed. I'm sure there's many other things, but please, CMA, prevention, falsification of records, and hotlines. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Up next, we have Alka Eri. Alka, you should be getting the prompt on your end. There you go, Alka. Your line is open. Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
Okay, perfect. Hello, my name is Alka Eri. I lost my sister to medical negligence. I would like to express support of a legislative proposal to change the burden of proof from clear and convincing evidence to preponderance of evidence in disciplinary cases. This change would align the California Medical Board with 41 other allopathic medical boards and help improve public trust. Public trust is vital for the medical board to be effective in its oversight role. Your role is not just to issue physician licenses, but to protect the public from incompetent and negligent physicians. In the face of a weak MICRA that prevents so many injured patients from seeking justice, the onus is on the medical board to thoroughly investigate concerns. My experience with filing a complaint to the medical board does not inspire confidence that every complaint is thoroughly investigated. I have attended enough medical board meetings and its sunset review over the past year to see that there is a troubling disconnect between what you say occurs with each complaint versus what actually occurs. Your words just don't match your actions, and that is why the public has lost faith in the medical board. The fact California employs standards for physician disciplinary action that are far more favorable to physicians than most other states is an injustice on its own. It proves what injured patients and their families have been saying for so long, that the medical board puts physician interests ahead of the public. Supporting the legislative proposal to change burden of proof requirements is at least a step in the right direction. I would also like to add that I admire board member TJ Watkins for his candor and courage, and I hope more board members will step up and help improve the medical board's transparency with the public. It's time for the medical board to prove it's not beholden to special interests at the expense of patient safety. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Up next, we have Susan Liu. Susan, let me open your line there. You should be seeing a prompt on your end.
Can you hear me?
Susan? Yes, your line's open. Please go ahead.
Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Awesome. Hi, everyone. My name is Susan Liu, and I'm originally from Santa Rosa, California. I'm a volunteer with Consumer Watchdog and the Fairness Act. I lost my mother tragically due to medical negligence when I was just 11 years old, and she was 38 years old. This happened in 1996 in San Francisco, California. For the past 25 years, my family has been unable to grieve her death, and we still haven't been able to talk about it. So when she died, not only did we lose this amazing Vietnamese refugee mother who owned a nail salon and took care of 13 family members, but the impact of her death continues on today. When my mother went in for elective cosmetic surgery, she had no idea that her surgeon was on probation, was operating out of an unaccredited facility, was performing surgery without an anesthesiologist, and had 24 lawsuits against him. She did not know this information. After she died, I grew up, and 25 years later, I looked up what happened, and I found out that this doctor had his probation extended 3 times and continued to practice for 15 more years. I grew up in America thinking that institutions like the medical board would live up to its mission of protecting consumers by advancing high quality, safe medical care. Like, I was like, these bodies, these institutions are here to protect us. But as a 36-year-old woman today who now has my own child, I wonder, how are you protecting us patients if the doctor continued to have his probation extended 3 times? Like, I'm sitting here going like, how is this patient-centered? So today I stand in solidarity with all the other medical negligence families here today and urge you to support and move forward on legislation that will change the burden of proof of preponderance of evidence for disciplinary actions. It is in your power, and this is the first step in providing consumer protection for Californians. And I just want you to remember that you have a choice here and that we would be so grateful if you can fulfill your mission on that. So I don't want more families to keep grieving and not grieving and processing
30
their
seconds
for
remaining.
decades. So please vote yes to change the burden of proof, because it's all on these technicalities and it's on all this technical language that patients they can't afford all these lawyers to help them with this, and you have the power to change it. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Up next, we have Michelle Montserrat Ramos. Michelle, I'm going to try sending you this first. See the prompt. There we go. Michelle, your line is open. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Michelle Montserrat Ramos, and I am with Consumer Watchdog. My comment is on the burden of proof legislative proposal. I have brought quite a few of my advocacy team to join us today to speak on this issue. We have been through a recent sunset review, and you have heard the calls for change, not just from consumers, but also from legislators and the media. This legislative proposal to change the burden of proof from clear and convincing evidence to preponderance of evidence is a big first step to changing the public's perception of this board and to begin to move forward toward consumer protection. Injured families and families that have lost their family members have found no accountability with this board. I know. I am one of them. My 36-year-old husband-to-be died tragically at the hands of a substance abusing physician due to an undisclosed surgical site infection and sepsis. I came forward with 2 autopsy reports, one from the LA County Coroner's Office that clearly stated these results. I came forward with documentation that the doctor had changed his medical records. I had court records detailing his felony possession of crack cocaine and prostitution's arrest, and there were other victims. Yet, you dismissed my complaint at the Central Complaint Unit. That is why I am still here, and I bring a team with me. The majority of my team reports to me that their cases were dismissed as well, with the most recent dismissal stating that the burden of proof of clear and convincing evidence was too strong to grant discipline. This is why the public is angry. You can't die anywhere else in California without your death being investigated, except in a hospital or medical facility. You can change this. As your report states, 41 other states use preponderance of evidence as their standard of proof. It is time to change. You have the opportunity to not only change the public's perception of this board, but also to save lives. I urge you to support and vote yes to move forward with legislation to change the burden of proof to preponderance of evidence for disciplinary actions. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Up next here, we have Tracy. Tracy, let me send you the request here. Should be seeing a prompt to unmute your microphone on your end. There you go, Tracy. Your line is open.
Okay, can you guys hear me?
We can.
Okay. Yes, my name is Tracy, and I am from Bakersfield. I am a volunteer with Consumer Watchdog and the Fairness Act. I am just a mother from Bakersfield who had no choice but to become an advocate after the tragic loss of my daughter and my grandson. We need to change the burden of proof now to save mothers' lives. Had preponderance of evidence been the standard of proof earlier, then her doctor would have gone before an administrative law judge following the death of another young mother, Bakersfield mother named Celeste Ortiz, died years before my daughter, and other young mothers and babies were harmed before Celeste's death and after Celeste's death. I urge you to support and vote yes to move forward with legislation to change the burden of proof to preponderance of evidence. You will save mothers' lives. I support Patients for Fairness, and I thank you guys.
Thank you for your public comment. Up next here, I have Xavier De Leon. Xavier, let me send you the request. You should be being prompted to unmute your microphone on your end. There you go. Please go ahead. We can, Xavier. Please go ahead.
My name is Xavier De Leon, and I am from Bakersfield, California. I'm a volunteer with Consumer Watchdog and the Fairness Act. My son never had a chance. He was forced to face postmortem C-section because his providers ignored clear complications. When we tried to file a complaint, we were discouraged from doing so. Although he only lived for 18 hours, his life mattered. The problem was that you allowed his doctors to practice for 25 years while he continued to harm mothers and babies. If the standard of proof had been preponderance of evidence, the deaths and harms would have stopped. If you had held this doctor accountable for his previous negligence acts in the years prior to my son's birth, then I believe he would be here. I urge you to support and vote yes to change the burden of proof to preponderance of evidence. I support Patients for Fairness. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Up next here, we have Charles Johnson. Charles, let me send you the request. Should be getting prompted on your screen now. There you go, Charles. Charles, your line is open. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Charles Johnson. I'm the chairman for the Fairness for Injured Patients Act. First and foremost, let me just commend all the other families and victims of medical negligence that have showed the courage and tenacity to bare their heart and soul to make sure that what has happened to them does not continue to happen to families. Myself and my extremely healthy wife, Kira, walked into Cedars-Sinai Hospital on April 12th of 2016 for what we expected to be the happiest day of our lives. And we walked straight into a nightmare. My wife was allowed to bleed internally for more than 12 hours after what was supposed to be a routine scheduled C-section. What the autopsy revealed to us, along with the medical records, is that this team that we trusted with her care did a C-section that should have taken 15 minutes. They did it in less than 2 minutes. In the process, they lacerated my wife's bladder. What we later came to find is that the doctor responsible for this procedure was already being investigated for harming multiple women. If this board had held him accountable for those other egregious offenses under preponderance of evidence, my wife would be here at her son's basketball game tomorrow. She would be here for Thanksgiving. She would be prepared to celebrate Christmas. But because this board has failed to act time and time again, we're left with voids in our life that cannot be filled. And so what I want to say is, very importantly, I want to thank TJ Watkins for his courage. But to all the members of this board, TJ should not be standing alone. Should not be standing alone. And while I want to urge you strongly to change the standard of evidence, my question for this board is how many more times will you require victims like myself, like all the other families that you've heard here, to bare their soul just to have
30 seconds remaining.
Other families be treated with dignity and respect? This board has the power to do better. And until you do, we will continue to demand that you do so. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your public comment. Up next, we have Tammy Smick. Tammy, let me send you the request. Should be prompted to open your line. Tammy, I'm going to give you another second here. I'm going to move on to Kimberly Turbine. Kimberly, you should be getting the prompt on your end. There you go, Kimberly. Your line is open. Kimberly, you're unmuted.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can. Please go ahead.
Yes, my name is Kimberly Turbine, and I'm from Stockton, California. I'm a volunteer with Consumer Watchdog and the Fairness Act. I was pregnant with my first child when I went to my local hospital in Tarzana to deliver my baby. I was nervous because I was a trauma victim. I never imagined that I would experience medical battery. I told all the staff to make sure to walk with me through the process, to just tell me before they did anything. When my doctor walked into the room, he was holding a pair of scissors to do an episiotomy. His first words to me were that he was going to cut me. I pleaded with him not to cut me without my consent all the way through. He decided to tell me to shut up. If I don't like it, to go have the baby on the floor or go have it in Kentucky. And he slashed my vagina 12 times all the way down to my rectum. Pretty much, I have everlasting trauma and injuries to my vagina that'll never go away. I have levator muscle spasms. At that time, he didn't want to give me any pain medication. I had to sit on a donut. I was walking around, honestly, as if I had been brutally sodomized for 6 months. That's what it felt like. That's what my injuries pretty much look like. I went to the hospital to try to talk to them. They told me to file a complaint to the medical board and pretty much just sue him. I filed my complaint with you. My complaint stayed in the system for an incredibly long time, and my doctor surrendered his license just before he died. The burden of proof needs to be changed. Too many women are being harmed during and linked to childbirth. I urge you to move forward with legislation to change the burden of proof from clear and convincing evidence. You have the opportunity to make real change for consumer protection and for mothers across the state. I support Patients for Fairness. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up, we have Evelyn Martinez. Let me open up your line. Okay, Evelyn, you should be getting a prompt on your end to unmute. Evelyn, your line is open.
Linwood. I'm a volunteer with Consumer Watchdog. My son was just about to start kindergarten, but his right to live was taken away due to medical negligence. Do you know what it feels like to have a mortuary home come knock on your door and scream mortuary to pick up your 5-year-old son and put him in a red bag and zipper him from head to toe? When I lost my son, I lost it all. I cannot sleep at night due to the fact that I have to envision my son in that hideous old cemetery. No family should ever have to go through this, and you have the power to change that. My son had his entire life ahead of him, but he had no rights, and I have no rights as a parent. His doctors made decisions without my consent, which directly led to my 5-year-old son's death. I'm devastated. His sisters are devastated. A child's death has to matter to you. You can't lead us to believe that we can file a complaint and tell us that consumer protection is your priority and then do nothing to change the pattern of negligence that leads to death and lifelong harm. I believe that changing the burden of proof will lead to changing the pattern of negligence. I urge you to support and vote yes to change the burden of proof. Preponderance of evidence. I support Patients' Fairness. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. I'm going to try to get Tammy Smick in here another way. Hey, Tammy, so you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, please go ahead.
Great, thank you so much. I'm Tammy Smick, patient safety advocate and also a board member with Consumer Watchdog. I already shared with you this morning how my son Alex died due to medical negligence. I would have thought the condition of his body, purple and stiff with rigor mortis in a hospital bed, the coroner's report and the medical records would have been enough to revoke the doctor's license. It seemed to me and to every medical expert I spoke with that there was clear and convincing evidence that my son died due to the negligent acts of his doctor. One doctor, a medical expert, even called me after reviewing after reviewing the evidence and said about the doctor, he killed your son. But perhaps the medical board needs more. And that is why I support a change in the evidentiary standard to a preponderance of evidence. Patients who are harmed or killed by a negligent doctor deserve justice, and dangerous doctors must be held to account. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Move this back real quick. And next up, we have Denise Johnson. Denise, you should be getting a request to unmute on your side.
My condolences to Dr. Thorpe on the loss of his child. My name is Denise Johnson, and I am from Tracy, California, and a volunteer with Consumer Watchdog. My son Richard was a talented software specialist and died at the age of 25 from medical negligence. He had been a brain cancer survivor, recently diagnosed, and was left to die from a treatable infection. My son was ignored and treatment was withheld by his provider. His death was completely preventable. When I filed my complaint with the medical board, I expected that his death would be taken seriously, but it wasn't. I was mistreated by an investigator who had called the house and was laughing at my review of my son's death. Shortly after our conversation, my complaint was dismissed with a letter stating that the burden of proof was clear and convincing evidence couldn't be met. With no accountability for my son's death, it was like I had been stabbed in the heart. There's no accountability legally due to the medical negligence cap of 1975 through the regulatory board system, due to the burden of proof and other laws that make it nearly impossible for Californians to hold their physicians accountable for a preventable death. I refuse to allow my son's death to be forgotten. I'm here today to urge you to support and vote yes to move forward with legislation to change the burden of proof to preponderance of evidence for disciplinary actions. Your sunset review has shown you that you need to meet us halfway to provide Californians some kind of consumer protection. The time is now. Please, please vote yes to move forward to change the burden of proof from clear and convincing evidence to the preponderance of evidence. I support Patients for Fairness, and I thank you very much.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up, we have Rosie Arthur's-daughter. Rosie, you should be getting a prompt on your end.
Hi. Okay, I want to second, third, fourth, fifth, the preponderance of evidence. These 8 items really deserve a stakeholders meeting to discuss them further and help develop what these could and should be. But I'll try to keep as brief as possible on a couple of things that are fairly short. In other industries, OSHA and the like have regulations that limit hours worked on shift work. That's because of a Texas City refinery that exploded because one of the operators was overextended on his time. In part, that contributed to my son's death because during the time that he was working 12-hour shifts and then expected to go home to a house full of people in COVID, rendering him with an 18-hour shift for 5 months straight. That's a part of what happened. So yes, whether you're a doctor or a refinery worker, extended hours over an extended time is deadly. So, and that can be deadly to any number of people. So that is something that needs to be looked at. On the retention period for the medical records, I think how this needs to be looked at is if a patient has come and gone and completed their treatment, perhaps saving them for 7 years. And in this day of, electronic storage where you can keep, umpteen things in the size of a terabytes in the size of a deck of cards, keeping records shouldn't be difficult. But in places where a patient has ongoing care, all of those should be available not only to the patient, but to the other doctors. So I think that limitation needs to be clarified. It's one thing to have somebody who hasn't been there for 10 years or only, was there 2 times to get a treatment. But if somebody's been there
30 seconds
for a
remaining.
period of time, yeah. Okay. Again, more along the lines of the fake records, we need that fixed. And you need to look at utilization review and independent medical review. These are often run by chiropractors out of state, and nobody is looking at them. You cannot make a complaint about them. So those need to be included
10
in
seconds remaining.
the reporting of disciplinary actions. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Up next, we have Sandra Perez. Sandra, you should be getting prompted on your end.
Hi, good afternoon, Sandra Perez, Hesperia, California. I'm a patient safety advocate and supporting the Fairness Act and Consumer Watchdog. I 100% support the change in burden of proof from clear and convincing evidence to the preponderance of the evidence. I had submitted a complaint against a provider who failed to look into the fact that my daughter had blood clots and complete occlusion of her mesenteric, splenic, and portal veins. And instead of actually doing anything to determine that she had bowel obstruction, they simply said she was constipated and sent her home to die. Of course, that isn't enough. It's not clear and convincing, and that's what the decision was from this board. They also accused her of being an alcoholic at the age of 17, even though she had been in and out of their facility for 3.5 years. She certainly was no alcoholic. They killed her, in my opinion. So in addition to that, the comments have been made that CMA has too much of a stranglehold on this board and the legislature, which is absolutely true and evident. It's been repeatedly stated in many meetings. So I would like to offer up a new proposal that you should consider besides changing the burden of proof. I propose that no current board member can actively work on behalf of the CMA as they sit on this board, either as a staff, employee, or executive member. In addition, it must include that their barment from holding any speakerships and any fundraising capabilities for the CMA, and cannot have done so within 5 years of appointment to this board. Ideally, I'd like 5 years. 2 years is a reachable target, I believe. I also would like to commend TJ Watkins for standing up for patients and advocating on our behalf. And I echo the statement by Charles Johnson. He should not be standing alone. You all should be doing your jobs and standing with him. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up, we have Sharon Washington. Sharon, you should be getting a request on your end.
Good afternoon. My name is Sharon Washington Barnes, and I'm from Antigua. I'm a volunteer with the Consumer Watchdog and Fairness Act. My brother Sean walked into a Kaiser Hospital on April 26, 2019, complaining that he could not breathe. And instead of receiving treatment, he was berated about drug use and questioned about his insurance status. And instead of transferring him to a hospital which had specialists, they told us that that could not happen because they couldn't get in contact with his insurance provider, which had they taken a second, they would have saw that his insurance information was already on file. And instead of transferring him to ICU, which noted that they were ready for him, they left him. They left him for 8 hours in an ER room. They left him for 8 hours in an ER room to cough up over 7 bags of blood. They left him to beg for intubation because he could not breathe. They begged him to fight for his life, and he told them, I cannot breathe. I feel blood on inhale and exhale. But nobody saw enough value in his life to just stop and take a second and actually care for him. My brother died because of medical negligence and what we believe is systemic racism in healthcare. They devalued him and denied him basic access to healthcare. My brother died at just 29 years old, leaving behind his yet unborn beautiful daughter that he'll never get a chance to hug, kiss, laugh, or just even know that she's named after him. And we filed a complaint with you just to receive a dismissal letter stating the burden of proof at clear and convincing evidence could not be met. And I'm just wondering, what more do you need? The pathology report stated that Sean died because of his lungs being filled with blood, which the hospital never treated. Where is my brother's justice? You need to change the burden of proof. It is time. I urge you to support and vote yes to change the burden of proof from clear and convincing evidence to preponderance of evidence. We need accountability. And this is the first step to not only getting patients equal rights within healthcare, but also stopping this long-lasting pattern of racism in healthcare that is killing Black women, Black mothers, Black daughters, Black sons, Black
30
brothers.
seconds
And
remaining.
it is outrageous at the fact that this has been allowed to go on for so long. And I support TJ Watkins and him taking the stand. And as a Black man on the board, I just hope that you all continue to make a stand for the racial side of this as well, and how this is unacceptable at all costs.
10 seconds remaining.
Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Sorry about that. Thank you for your public comment. Next up, we have Marion Hollingsworth. Marion, I'm sending the request.
Okay, do you have it?
Line's open. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Marion Hollingsworth, patient safety advocate. First, I neglected earlier to give my condolences to Dr. Thorpe for the passing of his son. I am truly sorry for your loss. Regarding this matter at hand, I urge you to support the fairness legislation to change the burden of proof for medical harm. My father died when his primary care doctor prescribed a cocktail of antipsychotic drugs, benzos, and painkillers, all given without consent or prior assessment in the hospital. This was for back pain that turned out to be an easily treatable condition. This cocktail of drugs sent him on a physical and mental nosedive that resulted in his death a short time later. You said this doctor met the standard of care, and my case was dismissed. I appealed, saying if you don't do anything, someone else will be harmed, and you denied my appeal. Not surprisingly, this doctor did go on to overdose a patient with 480 Vicodin in 6 weeks and ended up on your death certificate project. The nursing home doctor never spoke to me, yet continued to prescribe these black box medications as well. She falsified consent forms, even a do not resuscitate order. Your investigator promised me an accusation, but you allowed her to plead down to just a reprimand. That took 3 years and 2 months. I became an advocate so no other patient or family would suffer what my father and my family did. Finding a falsified DNR really shows how deliberate some of these cases are. Yet this board clears these doctors or gives them a lenient discipline. Please support legislation to lower the burden of proof. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. At this time, there are no additional requests in queue.
Okay, Sean, thank you. We'll bring this back to the board. Just in terms of process, because there's a lot for us to work through. At least I think there's a lot for us to work through here and consider, and probably a lot of conversation we want to have. I thought it might be good if we actually first took what I think might be more straightforward, the licensing legislative proposals. Those were technical changes that based on some things that occurred as a result of SB 806. But I thought if we could maybe as a group reach consensus around those, we can dispense with those, and then we can have a conversation on the other points, if that makes sense. Aaron, I don't know if you would like to run back through what those licensing proposals were, see if we have any comments or questions, but those seemed pretty straightforward to me in terms of needing our support.
Madam Chair, may I offer a suggestion?
I'm sorry, who is that? Dr. Kraus? Yes.
This is Howard Kraus. I'd like to offer a suggestion, although if any member of the board objects to it, I suppose we'll go back to doing this iteratively. But everything that I heard Aaron present seemed to be helpful and empowering to allow this medical board to become more effective. So unless there are objections from any single other board member, I wonder if you'd consider a motion to approve all of the suggestions that were made by Mr. Bone.
I'll certainly entertain that. I also want to, though, allow the opportunity for board members to suggest their own additions to the list. But I'm certainly, if we want to take this, I mean, if it's the will of the board that we support everything we already have on the table, and then we take it separately to consider any new ideas, I'm happy to do that too.
Or the other option would be to view it as a consent calendar and allow each board member to isolate out individual components to then be discussed separately.
I'm happy to do it either way.
Perhaps the simplest then would be to make a motion to approve these as a consent calendar, but requesting board members to withdraw individual items if they'd like them to be separated out for separate discussion and consideration. So moved.
Okay.
With a second discussion.
Second.
Sorry, Madam President, the second on that one was?
Well, I have three, so we'll give it to Dr. Yip. Okay, so I mean, we do have a motion and a second on the table. So is there discussion now from the board members?
Yes, Hawkins, may I speak?
Please.
So one of the biggest problems I have, I support many of these items and legislative proposals involved in discussions with them. As we talk about resources that we don't have, we can talk about them, but at some point we'd have to talk about if in fact they occurred, how we would be able to pay for them when we got a fraction of the dollars we need through the fee increase to do the business before these things could be imposed. So that's my biggest comment about that, is that there is the need to talk about the implications of change of preponderance, staffing, costs. And the last thing I would say is that, because I believe that the consumers are still on the calls, but we need their support with the legislator. We need this consumers report as they come and talk about things we aren't doing to help us talk to their legislators to get them to agree to things we do need to do the things to help protect them more. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hawkins. I agree with that point, and I was going to make that point as well. That and I just wanted to clarify for the public, right, that these are potential board legislative proposals, but we need the support of the legislature in order to enact these and in order to have these tools ultimately. So your point is well taken on that. Other comments? Questions?
Yeah, I'm just hoping that, along the lines of Dr. Hawkins, I'm hoping that some of these proposals have a dollar figure attached to them. If we do, back to the preponderance of the evidence, we do go to that standard, we're going to have many more cases, right? So I think we'll capture, more doctors, but you have to be able to pay for that. So I'm hoping there's a funding mechanism attached to any proposal that we put forward.
Yeah, and I guess I'll also make the point that we have not abandoned our request as part of this package. We've not abandoned our request for adequate increases to fees so that we can be adequately funded. That remains a legislative priority, even though we didn't get there well, according to the staff report, we're assuming we're not making any changes there. It remains a legislative priority from carrying over from the prior year. Additional comments or questions? Mr. Watkins?
Yeah, I support all these initiatives, but after knowing and learning through this process that how difficult it is for this board to get what it wants, I'm suggesting, the process works. Legislative change drives fees. As into answer Dr. Walken's concerns, it drives the fees, and we need the fees in order to execute the duties of this board more effectively. And if we can push it through the legislature via finding an author for these bills, then what we will get is the LEDs will do an analysis. And then that will also support our fee increase in the next 2 years. And then I think what we really need, because the public shows up, they showed up the last time for SB 806, they show up. The problem is once this thing goes into the background negotiations, we don't have enough lobbying power from the board to really go battle it out. And like the patient advocate says, we are ultimately going against the California Medical Association. If they don't agree with any of this, it's not going to happen. We know that, and we got a plan for that. And that's my only comment. I want to get optimistic that there's something that we could do, but I know how this process works and seeing it in action like many of us. But I remain optimistic and want to support all of this. So thank you.
Yes.
I agree with everything that's been said so far, and agree with Dr. Krause's recommendation, because everything that was presented by Mr. Bone, I think everyone agrees with. But I do want to say one thing. I hope this discussion here sheds light to the public on the process, because I think every board member, at least in my short time I've been on this board, that I've interfaced with is equally frustrated, as the public is. But due to regulations, rules, and laws, we are limited on what we could say or disclose. So we are bound by certain restrictions. We hope a lot of these recommendations actually do see the light of day and do get passed. But I hope the public understands the limitations that we're under. And with that said, I know a lot of public commenters talked about that we should pass these laws and pass these regulations. All we could do as a commission is offer support in our recommendation to the legislature, who has the sole authority to make that happen. So as a commission, people might be confused that we actually make these laws, but we don't. We are under a set of parameters that dictates what we can do, can't do, what we can say and can say, which is very, very frustrating as commissioners. So I just hope that this really sheds a lot of light. And secondarily, I think you asked for suggestions. I know a couple of the commissioners had concerns about the actual funding, so this might not be good, but a concern that we had was expert witnesses. I was wondering if we could, I don't know if this is the appropriate time, but seek possibly higher pay for the stipend or pay for the expert witnesses, because as we've seen, the pay is so low, and we're having a hard time getting expert witnesses. And I don't know if increasing the stipend or pay for them would attract more, and again, that costs more budget, which we don't have. So that creates another problem, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you for that suggestion. I would just ask Ms. Webb or Mr. Bone, what is I'm not sure what the mechanism is for pay for those experts. Is that legislated?
I'd be happy to take.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, that's through the budget process.
Okay.
Madam President, Mr. Rue. So Yeah, we went back and we researched that in preparation for today. That was, a topic that we spent some time looking into and to see whether there were any statutory impediments. And there are not that we could find so far that pertain to expert pay. And the most recent time that occurred in recent years was through a budget change proposal, where the board would have to get the authority to spend money in whatever regard. And it's a similar process for hiring staff, for IT projects. It's just, that goes through the budget, which is a piece of legislation, but is a different process than what we are talking about for statutory changes. Of course, then the biggest obstacle, if you will, is the board's fund condition. So I would say a very good way to set the board up so that way it can then in time pursue fee increases for expert reviewers is for the board to get the fee increase that it's looking for. So that way then we'll have the resources necessary to do so. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you. Ms. Campaverde?
I wholeheartedly support the proposals, and while acknowledging the headwinds that we're facing, I remain optimistic as well that this is an important first step. I wanted to introduce the proposals that Ms. Nichols discussed for consideration, the one on biological fluid testing and the time limit on good cause.
Thank you for reminding me about those. Mr. Bone, had you captured those when Ms. Nichols made those comments as well, or Ms. Webb?
I tried to write as
Yeah.
quickly as my hand would move. So what I captured from her with regard to biological testing was to make submission of mandatory testing a condition of licensure. That was the kind of the takeaway that I got from her in that regard. And then, Ms. Kimberly, were you referring to tolling, and subpoenas, or is that what you said a moment ago?
So I'm looking at my notes too. What I had was biological fluid testing requiring a sample. There wasn't a requirement before that folks had to submit. And then it was adding a time limit on good cause for an appearance. Did that jog your memory?
Yes, thank you. So I'm trying to make out my notes here.
It would be a change to Business and Professions Code, Section 2234, Subdivision G, to put a time limit in there by which time they would have to comply with sitting for an interview. With regard to submitting to biological fluid testing, I think the proposal may need to be that if an investigator requests a physician to submit to a biological fluid testing and they refuse, maybe there should be a cease practice order put in place until there's a compliance or a hearing. But I think what she's looking for is that if there's reason for them to request it and there's a delay, having to seek a motion to compel, that wastes valuable time is one perspective. I understand there's other perspectives, but during that time, the physician continues to practice until there can be an interim suspension order put in place or an order compelling them to submit.
If I may, it looks like Ms. Nichols is still here, and I don't know if there's any clarification or if that's exactly what she meant. I just want to make sure if we bring these proposals for discussion, it was what she intended. I do think she has a unique perspective here on how to improve the process.
Probably better is if she can submit it in writing. And that way, we don't have to guess on what she's trying to say. So
President Lawson, I can add her to the panelists if you'd like, or
Ms. Webb, tell me if that is appropriate, given that she was a public commenter here.
It's within your discretion.
Okay, then we can add her. I will I will suggest too that this is not the final time for us to have this conversation, right? I mean, to Mr. Brooks's point, we could submit it in writing, we could research it, find the right place for it, and then bring it back at our February board meeting, as well. So I don't, Mr. Bone, is that too late in the process?
Well, this is the ideal time, but I just wanted to note as well, since we're kind of thinking about future, is that the board will be going. It's very likely that around this time next year, the board will be submitting some form of a sunset report with a 2-year sunset extension. The year before that sunset review occurs, which should be in 2023, you would submit a report, which is about 12 months from now. So whatever these other ideas are that the board wishes to consider further, if we can't get it into a bill this coming year, then we can put that into that next report for consideration during 2023.
Thank you. Dr.
Yes,
Thorpe?
and just to clarify, I'm on the line, and so I just wanted to say real quick on the biological fluid testing. This is Kathleen Nichols. On the biological fluid testing, Carrie Webb had it correct. The issue is that when the investigator asks for the sample, right now the doctor can just say no, and then that's the end of it. Then we have to go through a long, complicated process to get other evidence to pursue a motion to compel regarding an impairment issue. So that would be a correct interpretation of what I was saying. Is it would be great if we could get something where we could have a cease practice order listed, issued in the meantime, just so the doctor can't continue to treat patients if they truly are impaired. And with respect to the physician interviews, yes, the issue is the time frame. The section we have now allows the doctor to say, well, if I had good cause not to show up, then that would be a reason, and I can't be disciplined for the failure to cooperate. The issue is the delays regarding the attorneys and setting up the interviews. So what I was requesting was to put some sort of a time limit on, once an investigator contacts them for an interview, what is the time frame that they would have to appear in front of board staff. And then lastly, the subpoena issue was regarding tolling the statute of limitations when we do not get records. And it's problematic because the subpoena enforcement process is so long that we lose valuable time on our statute of limitations. So that's what that one was about. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Nichols. I'll ask the board the question this way, which is there anyone who would not like to see those proposals included as part of our 2022 legislative proposals? So it sounds like Dr. Thorpe.
This is not to respond to that specific question, but I did just have a question for Mr. Bone. Recognizing that these are all legislative proposals, do you have information that in terms of what the atmosphere is in the legislature to accept these proposals? You have a sense of where these would go and how likely they are to be successful?
Oh, that's a great question, Dr. Thorpe. My expectation is that there is a fairly large degree of awareness about what the issues are before the board with our sunset review, with recent media coverage that we've been discussing recently. So I would like to think that would elevate our chances to find an author and get some of these proposals through. I don't know that I could be more clear than that. After this point, once the board finalizes the proposals, then I'll get set to work getting into contact with legislators' offices in order to take their temperature and to essentially shop to try to find, authors who are going to be in a position to be, embracing this and, to help us, advocate for, for these changes and put them into law. I can't be more specific than that, I'm afraid, Doctor. I understand the question and empathize with it. But this is a process where you try and then you see, how it goes.
So Dr. Kraus, I guess as the maker of the motion, are you willing to incorporate Ms. Nichols' proposals as well for Alejandro's request?
Yes, I accept those as friendly amendments.
Terrific. Dr. Yip, I believe you were the seconder. Is that okay with you? I'm seeing your head nodding and you're saying that that is okay with you as well. Are there other comments or questions? Mr. Watkins?
I had an amendment, a proposal that I would like to suggest as well, and maybe for consideration. And I can send the wording to Aaron directly. But in essence, this relates to recently, real life circumstances. One of the things that always is troubling to me is when we have the hearings and we only hear from the doctor, we never hear from the patients. And I actually reached out to our executive director, who was helpful in pointing me to Business and Professions Code 2330, which basically says that, that the complainant, we can only give a statement to the DAG or to the HQI, Dr. Ms. Nichols' office. And then that statement will be the only statement that we will know in the record, but they can't present at hearing. And I thought, well, the doctor can present at hearing, and usually, there's 3 lines about what happened to the actual people involved, the patients involved. And I would like to expand that exposure so that the patients also have an opportunity to state their case before the board. And so there's just one word that needs to be removed. These statements shall not be, so right now, these statements shall not be considered by a panel of the division within that section. And I would just like to change that. They said to these statements shall be considered, just to remove the word not, and then it gives us better access. I'm sure this will go through, the proper legal channels to make sure that it actually does what I intend. And the spirit of it is to create equality. And maybe, I don't know how the rest of the board feels about it, but it's about equality and transparency. Otherwise, I see most of the time the patient's voice are being suppressed to the background and the doctor's voice is used and loud. And like some of the DAGs have explained, that they have property rights. And, they give all these legal reasons. But I'm saying that we are in the business of public protection. And in the public protection part, is it possible, if we make that change, that we give the patients also the opportunity to present in front of us for 15 minutes at the hearing and give their own statement, not an interpretation, not what somebody else thinks, but they're making an actual presentation. So that's what I'm getting at with changes to section 2330.
Mr. Watkins, just on that point, I don't know personally whether that's the right spot for that change or not, but allowing patients additional voice or opportunity to participate in the process is something I definitely agree with and think that we should think about. So I don't know if that's the right spot for it. I don't know if we want Mr. Boner or Ms. Webb, do we need additional analysis of that section? I'm not aware of whether that's the right spot, but I am completely open to giving patients additional voice in the process. I know we've heard as well about our own policy, right, of contacting complainants, and that implementation of that policy may be imperfect, to say the least. and that we might want to improve that. I don't know that that type of thing requires a statutory change. That's probably a policy for us, but there may be other statutory changes, Mr. Watkins, that we'd like to pursue to provide patients an additional voice.
I just put it out there so that we can start exploring, because it is a big gap and it is a big issue. So I'm okay to proceed.
Would you like that to come back? We could perhaps establish a legislative priority of providing patients additional voice and come back with some more detail at our February meeting about where those changes might be made. That'll give our staff enough time to research it, but we could have a broad, I guess, policy.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and it will, we are just making, proposals. So I think that's fair, and it will probably be better done by staff who has a bigger knowledge of this than me. So thank you.
Thank you. Would there be any objections to including that in sort of the manner, but from other board members in the manner we were just discussing, which is come back in February with potentially more detail about where those statutory changes could be made, but that the sort of overarching goal of increasing or providing additional voice for patients in the process is a good one. Okay, looks like I'm not seeing objections on that point. Doctor, yeah.
Am I speaking or?
You are, yep.
Okay, I would just say yes. I mean, we've heard
okay.
that our impression that complainants are being interviewed is not necessarily happening to the degree that they want and probably is appropriate. And so I think that I would agree that additional voice is needed, and we need to decide where it should occur. Perhaps early on makes most sense.
Thank you. Dr. Helzer, I know you were waiting patiently to provide some broader comments.
Thanks. I'm supportive of these proposals. I'd like to go back to my earlier comment that I think the language about requiring reporting of any employment discipline is too broad. It should be more specifically described. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Helzer. Are there any additional comments? So I think that where we're at is we have consensus. We'll ultimately take a vote, but we have consensus support for the initial proposals that were part of the staff report. We have consensus support to include the recommendations from Ms. Nichols. And it sounds like we have consensus support for a broad, the broad concept of providing patients or developing legislative proposals that would provide patients additional voice or agency in the process in some respect. And we're going to be coming back in February with some additional detail and specifics there about where we could make those improvements. Does that sound right? And then if it does, Dr. Kraus, I would ask if you could just amend your motion to encapsulate everything I just said. Dr. Kraus. I don't know if Dr. Kraus can hear me.
Via phone as well, and I see his phone connection is gone, so.
Okay.
He looks like he's dialing back in right now. So.
Okay. Then he probably just missed what I was articulating. We'll give him a minute. Here he comes.
There, he's back now.
So Dr. Kraus, are you back and can you hear us now? Are you talking? You're on mute. We can't hear you.
Yeah, my audio line had been bumped off and I'm now just back.
Okay, so I had been talking to you earlier when you were off for a moment, but I believe that the motion, I believe we need a minor amendment of your motion to expand it again to include this idea that we're going to do some further research, but that one of our overarching goals would be to provide patients more opportunity to participate in the process or more agency in the process, but that's going to come back with further refinement detail at our February board meeting. But otherwise, I think we have consensus on all other points, including the legislative proposals in the staff report and then the ones that were articulated by Ms. Nichols.
I think that's our intent, and that's good policy. I don't think it's ready for prime time to bring that proposal to a legislator because there are so many layers of the law in terms of the methodology we would pursue to bring the complainant into the process. But I'm happy in this amendment to this motion to support that as board policy and board intention.
Good. And Dr. Yip, how about you? Okay, so we have a motion and second that encapsulates, I think, where we have consensus. And Mr. Bone, do we need anything else? I mean, I know that these discussions often influence the conversations and your thinking when you're having them with legislatures about the finer detailed points too, but is there anything else you need from us before we advance to a vote?
It sounds like we've got a pretty wide portfolio with regard to those different matters. So we have the broad direction from the board. There's certainly, a number of details that would need to be added to each of those, when it gets to the point of, crafting language and working with the legislator. So if the board is comfortable with staff having that discretion within those boundaries that, the motion articulates, then no, I think that's fine. And then, of course, I'll be reporting back at subsequent board meetings about our progress and be in contact with, the board leadership, between meetings as well, for guidance and consultation.
Great, thank you. All right, I think unless there are any further questions or comments, I think we're ready to proceed to the roll call vote.
Could we restate the motion, please?
Yes, I think the motion is to adopt the legislative proposals that are included in the staff report. It's also to include the proposals that were articulated by Ms. Nichols related to biological fluid samples and good cause. And then to include this broader legislative, a legislative proposal or a policy area of interest for us, which is increasing patient opportunity for access or agency in the disciplinary or enforcement process. But that is going to come back with further refinements at our February meeting. And I mean, frankly, all of this is going to come back at our February meeting, depending on whether we find a sponsor for any of the legislation or whether there's something in print.
Thank you.
Does that sound right, Dr. Kraus?
Perfect.
Perfect. Great. Dr. Yip? Okay. Any additional comments?
Ms. Lawson, thanks. Sorry, this is Dr. Thorpe. I do have some question about the preponderance of evidence, replacing the clear and convincing. And it isn't in the idea that I think that it's somehow, I mean, I understand the importance of a complainant actually having the ability to get their case heard. But there was a reason why, the appellate court held this standard of proof previously, and California's been out of step with most of the United States forever. This is not a new thing, and the idea that we as a board of the DCA are going out on our own to use a different standard of evidence than every other board seems inappropriate to me. So I would be disingenuous, I guess, if I didn't raise those concerns.
Okay. So it sounds like you might vote against the motion if the motion that's on the table advances, given that that's part of the proposal.
Ms. Lawson, may I offer a point of order?
Please.
This is Howard Krause. And that is in the original motion, I used the term consent calendar. So in that, Dr. Thorpe is concerned about that one item, and I think we pretty much have consensus on everything else. I think it would be appropriate to remove that one item from this first vote. And then after we passed everything else, then we would have another motion to change the standard from clear and convincing to preponderance of evidence. And then Dr. Thorpe would be recorded as the one vote against that one issue on that one item. I think it's important because of the way in which the motion was stated as a consent calendar.
That's fine with me.
Yeah, I apologize. I should have asked for this to be pulled out as a separate item. I agree with Dr. Krause.
Okay, so let's pull that out. We'll take the clear and convincing evidence separately, but we'll let everything else remain in, and let's go to a roll call vote on everything else.
Mr. Brooks. Mr. Brooks.
Aye.
Ms. Campaverde.
Aye.
Dr. Gonadev here.
I believe he is not here.
Dr. Hawkins. Dr. Hilzer.
Yes.
Dr. Krause.
Yes.
Ms. Lawson.
Yes.
Ms. Lubiano.
Yes.
Mr. Rue.
Yes.
Dr. Thorpe. Mr. Watkins.
Yes.
Dr. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. That motion carries unanimously. Passes unanimously. I'll entertain now. Yes.
Now I would offer a motion for the policy of the medical board to seek legislative action to change our evidence standard from clear and convincing to preponderance of evidence.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Thank you. We have a motion from Dr. Krause, a second from Dr. Yip to change the evidentiary standard from clear and convincing evidence to preponderance of the evidence. Is there any further discussion on this question? Dr. Hawkins?
So notwithstanding the fact that over 40 other states use that standard, I would need more information, even beyond the cost, about how this changes what we do. And so I'm just saying, I need more information. I don't know if this is the time to get all the information I need, or if there's a primer carried to this, but I need more information about the implications of the change.
Okay.
Even though it's just a recommendation.
Any additional comments or questions?
You've already heard my comment, so.
Thank you. All right, if there are no additional comments or questions, we'll move to a roll call vote on this individual legislative.
Madam Chair, I do have a quick question.
Please.
So 40 other states uses which format or
States.
majority of the
Preponderance of evidence as the evidentiary standard, and California is clear and convincing. Ms. Webb could probably explain that with more detail and clarity.
No,
on
that's
the
fine. I just
implications
wanted
for the
to
federal.
get that clarification.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I do think it's the standard for the administrative case, right? It's not the medical board's standard, if you will, but it's the standard for the administrative cases as they work their way through those processes.
For the medical board's disciplinary cases. yeah.
Correct, for our disciplinary cases, right? But yes, it's not our standard, right? Yes. The standard for our cases. Sorry, maybe that's a legal distinction that I'm having in my mind.
Yes, ma'am. Very good.
Okay, are we ready to proceed to the roll call vote on this, or does anybody need additional information?
Can I ask Carrie to make a succinct comment about this, if you feel comfortable?
Well, succinct, I'll do my best. Certainly,
there will be more cases that would meet the burden of proof for discipline. Now, that will mean more cases being referred to the HQIU for formal investigation, more cases being referred to the Attorney General's office for prosecution, and more cases coming to you for review. But the Medical Board of California is judged by most of what the other states are doing. And so reports come out that treat our standard as if it's the same as every other state's standards, when most of the states use preponderance of the evidence. So whether this ends up being changed or not, and it is within the legislature's hands, they're hypercritical at times of the medical board, but they often don't give the board the tools that the board itself requests, and they often make changes that the board opposes that makes the work more difficult. And so this is something that will put the Medical Board of California on par with most of the other allopathic medical boards across the US and its territories. But you're right, there will be an impact in the number of cases, which also means the impact to resources. But more physicians who have not followed the standard of care will be disciplined and subject to corrective action so that their practice can improve and patients can be safer.
Thank you very much.
Additional questions, comments?
Clarifying question. So is clear and convincing evidence the standard used for other healing arts boards in California?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
May I offer one last comment, Madam Chair?
Please.
My greatest frustration in serving on this board is all too often feeling powerless, knowing that we could do a better job. So the way I view this entire panoply of suggestions brought forward by Mr. Bone, including this, is it just gives us more power and it gives us more authority and a better opportunity to do our job. It doesn't mean that doctors will be victimized or that we'll be frivolous in how we dispense justice. It just gives us greater power and authority. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kraus. I think I'd like to move to the roll call vote. Ms. Caldwell, please call the roll.
Aye.
Ms. Campoverde,
Aye.
Dr. Hawkins,
Yes.
Dr. Helzer, Dr. Kraus,
Yes.
Ms. Lawson,
Yes.
Ms. Lubiano,
Yes.
Mr. Rue,
Yes.
Dr. Thorpe, Dr. Watkins,
Yes.
Dr. Yip.
Yes.
Thank you.
If I may,
Thank you.
there's to revisit your request for any other guidance for me as I embark upon this task. It was helpful, and I apologize for the lateness, and I wish it had occurred to me a few moments ago. It was very helpful that the board had a list of priorities in the sunset report that was published at the beginning of this year. We do have quite a few proposals, which is great. Options are great, right? Sometimes, though, it may be difficult to, I may be faced in situations where legislators are interested in some of them, but they just have they don't have the capacity to take on every single idea, or are open to multiple, but say, Aaron, what do you really need the most? So if there's any direction that the board, has in that regard, I mean, certainly lots of comments, and I understand the significance, right, of the preponderance change. That's very weighty in terms of, the board's mission. So I could probably infer that there's a significant amount of priority assigned to that. So I open to any comments, or I could be, I could work with, with the president and the vice president, between meetings on those kinds of questions as well. But I did want to note that and raise that in response to your question.
Madam Chair,
Yeah,
I would move to delegate that to the executive committee.
Okay. Is there a second for that? Thank you. What I was going to say as well is that I think that this group, based on what I'm hearing as part of this conversation today, and based on what I've heard as part of our meeting yesterday as well, and in addition to what we've heard from the patient advocates that have joined the meeting today, I think those items that would address those concerns and directly improve the experience in the process, and also improve our outcomes for our patients, especially those who have been harmed, are the areas of necessary focus and conversation and prioritization with the legislature. And I'm happy to work on those per Dr. Krause's motion with Dr. Hawkins, Ms. Lubiano, who's the board secretary too. I think we can. Carrie, you'll have to tell me if we can work on those as a group of 3 or if it's a group of 2, but I'm happy to work on those as a committee.
It would have to be a publicly noticed meeting if it's more than 2.
Okay, so then probably it would be in line with how Dr. Hawkins and I worked on the sunset review process together with staff as the board's authorized representatives there. Okay.
That'd be very helpful to staff. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Do we need, I guess there is a motion on the table. It's
Yes.
Motion from Dr. Krause, a second from Dr. Yip, I believe. Perhaps
Correct.
we can have a roll call vote on this point.
Mr. Brooks.
Ms. Call.
Now wait a minute, because the motion was for the executive committee, which is different than president and vice president. So
I will amend my motion that the prioritization is delegated to the president and vice president working with staff.
Second.
Thank you. All right, can we have a roll call vote on this?
Aye.
Ms. Campoverde. Dr. Hawkins. Dr. Hilzer.
Yes.
Dr. Krause.
Yes.
Ms. Lawson.
Yes.
Ms. Lubiano.
Yes.
Mr. Rue.
Yes.
Dr. Thorpe. Dr. Thorpe.
Looks like Dr. Thor might be offline.
Dr. Watkins.
Yes.
Dr. Yip.
Yes.
Okay, so that motion carries unanimously as well. Thank you all. So we're done with item 13B, I think, unless there's anything further, Mr. Bone, on that. And we'll move on to item 13C. Is that Ms. Webb?
Thank you, Madam President. Are there any questions that the members have regarding the board's pending regulations that staff can respond to?
and I can just make a quick comment that I'll give a in-depth update on the physician health and wellness program on the next agenda item. But the approved certifying organizations, this has to do with certifying organizations that or approving certifying organizations that certify medical and midwife assistants. That is going through the final review. So DCA just approved the package to be submitted to the Office of Administrative Law for their review. So I expect at the next board meeting, we should have approved regulations on that. And then the notice to consumers, that is regulations that will change the signage requirements to be more clear, that the board licenses and regulates our licensees and where to call to make a complaint, email address, etc. It's just more clear signage, and it will require that the notice be given in the primary language of the patient or the patient's representative. So that has been submitted to the Office of Administrative Law for the 45-day public comment period, which is underway. And I'll be able to give an update on that at the February meeting. So happy to answer any questions.
Board members have any questions? And I guess on that point, because we'd taken all of these individually, I guess I need to open that up for public comment too, whether there's any public comment on the regulatory actions. Sean, could you open that up for public comment?
Sorry about that. The Q&A window is open for anyone wishing to make a public comment. You can type a message in there. Also, you can raise your hand. For any call-in users, if you'd like to raise your hand, do so please by pressing *3.
Yeah, and just a reminder, this is on item 13C specifically, which were the regulatory actions that are listed in our staff report.
First up, we have Rosie Arthur's-daughter. Rosie, you should be getting the prompt on your end. Yes, your line's open.
Okay. This would actually apply to both 13B and C. Whether you're talking about the evidence issues or any of these other issues, because of the problems with the records that are kept and then the embargo on patient access to them for a number of years, records have been distorted to the point that they are obviously.
Could you focus your comments on item 13C? There are 3 specific regulatory actions. Do you have a comment on those?
Yes, that any of these things, you have to have the records that are available in good order. Otherwise, you can't enforce any action that you take or any direction you take. So it's just something that needs to be done. It's a housekeeping type of a thing. And right now, it's not there. You can't enforce anything that you propose to do if there's a problem with the foundational aspects of the evidence and the records. So that would apply to everything. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Up next, we have Hannah Ree. Hannah, you should be getting a prompt on your side to open your line. Hannah Ree, if you're getting that prompt.
Hello?
Hannah, you're...
Hannah Ree, Black Patients Matter. So, of course, I would support a physician and wellness program, but I would caution the board about protecting physicians in power, professors, physicians with tenure within the UC system who utilize their power to take advantage of young physicians. There are physicians that have already been guilty of sexual assaults, but are still being protected by the UC system. And I would just caution the board again about the physician wellness program, because some issues cannot be resolved or cured or managed. And so those individuals should not be caring for patients in vulnerable positions as well. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up here we have Susan Lauren. Susan, let me send you a request. Should be being prompted on your end to unmute your line.
Okay, hi. I'll make it quick. I wanted to agree with Rosie that the foundational problem is records, and that's why I keep talking about patient or consumer co-authored records right up front. And, you know, even the most well-meaning doctor can get things wrong. And if we're talking about patient safety and prevention, that's what we really want to do, is prevent harm so that we don't even have to have all these cases go to you. So I've been trying to work on this consumer co-authored records where, you know, I understand the doctors might be thinking logistically, oh, that's just never going to happen. We don't, I do it with my doctor now, who's a good guy, and it's not very hard. He shows me what he's written, and I don't even have to do it with him anymore because he's doing no harm and I trust him. But okay.
Ms. Lauren, can I please ask you to just focus on these 3 regulatory actions?
Sure. Well, I'll end. I just wanted to say that, and I do too want to express my condolences to Dr. Krause. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. At this time, I do not see any additional requests in queue.
Okay, we'll bring this back to the board. I don't think there's any action item here, so we can move on to agenda item 14, which is an update on the status of the Physician Health and Wellness Program. Ms. Webb?
Yes, thank you very much. And this is just an update on the Physician Health and Wellness Program proposed rulemaking. No action is required. The proposed language in the packet has already been approved by the board and is included for background for new members. As you may know, at one time, the board had a diversion program, which was deemed ineffective and was terminated to further consumer protection. And thereafter, the legislature required the Department of Consumer Affairs to establish the Substance Abuse Coordination Committee to establish the uniform standards for substance abusing licensees. The board's Physician Health and Wellness Program, or PHWP, will have to comply with these uniform standards. The PHWP is not a diversion program. If the board becomes aware of a physician with a substance abuse issue, the board will initiate the enforcement process. In contrast, if a physician self-refers to the PHWP, the board will not be alerted so long as they do not have practice restrictions in place placed on them by the program vendor, and so long as they are compliant with their program. A relapse is a violation and will trigger a report to the board. The board will then initiate enforcement action. I think this is different than other physician health programs that address this, but this is part of the requirement for complying with the uniform standards. So staff submitted proposed rulemaking. This is after several revisions, but the latest to the Department of Consumer Affairs, on May 6th of 2021. And the package has been reviewed by DCA's regulation unit, and they have provided valuable feedback and suggestions. For instance, DCA recommends amending the proposed language to move the requirements for the vendor out of the regulations and into the bidding and contract process. This will give more flexibility as things change and make sure that we don't run into issues with other state entities involved in the contract process as contract requirements change. And so we don't want to have to do regulatory changes every time there's a change in the contract process and the things that the Department of General Services requires. So I thought that was a great idea. Additionally, and it will also smooth the review and hopefully approval of the regulations. It will reduce the language significantly. Additionally, since DCA has now formalized some changes to Uniform Standard number 4, dealing with biological fluid testing, staff will amend the board's own uniform standards regulations as part of this rulemaking on the PHWP for consistency, since the PHWP regulations will refer to the board's uniform standard regulations. This will avoid the Office of Administrative Law holding it up for consistency reasons. So board staff will work with DCA on the substantive changes and will bring modified language back to the board for approval at the February board meeting. Once the amended language is approved by the board, DCA, and the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency, it will be submitted to the Office of Administrative Law to be noticed for a 45-day comment period. And then upon approval by OAL of the language and filing with the Secretary of State, board staff will seek bids for the vendor. After the contract with the vendor is in place, there will have to be another rulemaking to set the fees for the participants in the PHWP. That is the update. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, are there any questions or comments? All right, seeing none, let's open this up for public comment. Sean?
Okay, the Q&A window is open. Anyone wishing to make a public comment, please type a message in there or raise your hand. Callers on phones, you can press *3 in order to raise your hands there. First up, we have Hannah Ree. And you should be getting a prompt to unmute your line.
Yes, hello, thank you. I apologize for my previous comment. I thought we were reviewing the Physician Health and Wellness Program during that time. So for the Physician Health and Wellness Program, I understand it's just for substance use, but it should also include those who have histories of sexual deviancy, let's say, or sexual assault. That should also be included. That kind of information needs to be public information so that the public and young physicians, especially female physicians, do not suffer at the hands of tenured professors within the UC system who abuse their positions and their power to take advantage of subordinates. Thank you.
Concluded.
Yes.
It sounded like you concluded. You were off topic and we're trying to stay on topic. Thank you.
I'm commenting on the Physicians Health and Wellness Program.
Right, but you're off topic to sexual misconduct. This program has nothing to do with that.
And so my comment spoke to that. My statement was that did you not hear my comments, Ms. Webb?
All right, let's cut this off, Sean. Thank you. Can we go on to the next commenter, please?
Virginia, let me go ahead and send you a request to open your line.
Hello again. It's hard to comment when you don't have the wordage of this whole thing, but I'm really hoping that it seems like you have vendors that these doctors can go to help with mental health concerns, is my understanding of it. And I'm hoping that these vendors are well informed of trauma and trauma-informed care and how to deal with trauma, because most of the time people are labeled with a mental health disorder when it's often trauma, and they go down a whole different road when actually a trauma therapist could help much better. So I'm really, and of course, doctors are very much traumatized, especially now with COVID and the hours they work. And so I'm really hoping that there is a lot of wordage about trauma and trauma-informed care in this, or else you'll be doing significant harm to the doctors and sending them totally down a wrong path. When in fact, if they got proper treatment, they can resume work and be okay. So please consider that trauma is thoroughly addressed in the appropriate manner. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up, we have Michelle Montserrat Ramos. Michelle, you should be seeing a request now.
Michelle Montserrat Ramos, and I'm with Consumer Watchdog. I was part of the team that was behind the end of the diversion program. My testimony led to the uniform standards for substance abusing healthcare professionals. It is my understanding from my conversations with Department of Consumer Affairs that the change in the biofluid testing was only meant for respiratory therapists, healthcare professionals with limited salaries, and those healthcare professionals that are under supervision over 50% of the time. The change in biofluid testing was not meant for physicians. Please review that change. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. At this time, I don't see any additional requests in queue.
Okay, thanks, Sean. We will bring this back to the board. Are there any other questions or comments from board members before we move on to the next item? All right, we'll move on to the next item, which is agenda item 15, updates from external boards and organizations, beginning with Ms. Melby, an update from the Board of Registered Nursing.
Thank you for this opportunity to address you guys again. This seems to be a pattern each quarterly meeting. So our Nurse Practitioner Advisory Committee met on Tuesday. They did pass the initial draft language to implement AB 890 in regulations, and that went to our full board, who has met the last 2 days. Our board did agree to start the regulatory process with amendments that were suggested, as well as keeping in mind that they can go back and amend with the 45-day comment period, as well as amending multiple times after that before it's done. We are still looking for a naming convention for the 103 NP and the 104 NP, although we all know what we're talking about. I'm not sure that the public does. And then we have still to address the fee section for adding the various categories to the nurse practitioner's certification through our board. On our website, the regulatory language has moved. So if you did want to go back and pull that up, you would go into rn.ca.gov, enter the meeting section, and then go to archived board meetings, since our board finally ended yesterday at 5:18 p.m. So now officially is over. So with that, you could find those language. In the language, I did want to draw your attention to, there is some blue text, and typically there is not blue text in proposed language, but that was to show the changes that were made from the last interested parties meeting that was held on October 26th. To now going forward. So our board continues to take input. We will put it out again through after it makes it to OAL for any kind of public comments and such, and continue to work on that. There is, of course, was a lot of discussion in our board and at the committee of Wood's cleanup bill, AB 852. Out there. And so the people that seem to be really wanting to kind of write new law versus having regulations formed to address the law that's currently passed were repeatedly directed back to that, so that they knew that they had an avenue to continue to get their voice heard. I'm open for any questions that you might have or any comments. I'm here.
Ms. Melby, thank you. Any questions or comments before I move on to the next update? We're going to take these all at once and take public comments on them all at once. All right, thank you, Ms. Melby. We have an update on the Health Professions Education Foundation.
Thank you very much. Update on Health Professional Education Foundation, HPEF. HPEF last met September 8, 2021, and HPEF dissolution occurred October 1st, 2021. It no longer exists. HPEF was incorporated into the new Department of Healthcare Access and Information, HCAI. Physician and other healthcare providers can investigate financial support programs by visiting the two following California portals, and are encouraged to do so immediately to confirm the types of support and application deadlines. They are the Department of Healthcare Access and Information, hcai.ca.gov. And the second one is the State of California grant portals. That's grants, plural, grants.ca.gov. That ends my report on HPEF.
Thank you, Dr. Hawkins. Do you have a subsequent report on the Physician Assistant Board? Because I think you're up next as well.
Yes, I do. The PA board last met November 8th, 2021. A new board member was introduced and sworn. There was an election of president and vice president. The PA board is now independent of the medical board and is now fully staffed. I want to briefly highlight two legislative items. The first is SB 806, approved by the governor in October 2021. This is the PA board's sunset bill. It makes various statutory changes to reflect the independence of the PA board as a standalone board. The second is Senate Bill 697, SB 697. This bill took place January 1st, 2020. It includes substantive changes in PA assistant practice in California. The bill and changes in the PA practice are important enough to review in a future board meeting. And that ends my report. The next PA board meeting is February 7th, 2022 in Sacramento. Expected to be in person. That ends that report as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hawkins. That's exciting about an in-person meeting. Are there any questions or comments from board members on any of these updates on external boards and organizations?
Lori here for a quick sec.
Yep.
Thank you. Sorry, I lost sound for a short amount of time. Dr. Hawkins, did you say that the HPEF is no longer in existence? Is that right?
Yes, it was dissolved. It got incorporated into the new Department of Healthcare Access and Information. However, medical board fees support HPEF, and I recommended that we share with individuals in the healthcare professions that they visit the website, hcai.ca.gov and grants.ca.gov to find out which grants they may and loans forgiveness may be available to them and what the deadlines are.
Great. Thank you so much.
Very welcome.
Any other questions or comments? All right, could we open it up for public comment, please, Sean, on these updates?
It is open and anyone can raise their hand now if we make a public comment for this particular agenda item. And if any callers on the line would like to make a public comment, you can raise your hand by pressing *3. First up, we have Henry. Henry should be receiving the request on your side.
Black Patients Matter here. Just wanted to say that we're very happy to see the progress that's occurring. We wanted to make further comments, but are in fear of angry comments from Ms. Webb, so we will leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. This time, President Lawson, I don't see any additional requests. Oh, one just came in. Rosie Arthur's daughter. Rosie should be getting the prompt on your screen.
Yes, I had my hand up on the previous one, and then everything went away. The sidebar went away and all that. So I'm just trying to get you blindly in the dark here. the Physicians Health and Wellness Program.
Ms.
There
Arthur
have
Soder,
been,
we're not on that item. We're on updates from external boards and organizations. I need you to keep your comments focused to that item.
well, it would be nice if you answered my raised hand when it was up. I mean, when you have a problem with your site not functioning correctly.
Well, I apologize, but we've moved on past that item and we're on other business now, and we need to move on with our board's business.
This time I don't see any additional requests in queue.
Thanks, Sean. All right. Do any other board members have comments or questions about our updates from external boards and organizations? If not, let's move on to agenda item 16, which is the discussion and possible action on the proposed agenda item for the Midwifery Advisory Council meeting. I believe there's just one agenda item there, but who do we have? Ms. O'Connor for this? Yes.
Yes, good afternoon, board members. It is just a short item. At the last board meeting in August, the board approved the agenda for the next MAC meeting, which will be held in December. We just wanted to add one additional item to that agenda, which is discussion and possible action regarding 2022 Midwifery Advisory Council meeting dates. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. O'Connor. Do we have any questions?
Ms. O'Connor?
The date of the next MAC meeting or the dates of the Midwifery Advisory Council meeting dates?
That's okay. Never mind.
Ms. O'Connor and President Lawson, it occurs to me too that there's another item and that we need to add, and that is consideration of a new member. I'm not sure if that's being advertised yet, Ms. O'Connor, forgive me, but we need to have a new physician member appointed to the MAC, and I'm not sure where we were with that.
It has been advertised. I'll have to double check, but I believe we were going to do the vote on the new member at the following MAC meeting, because I don't, yeah, which I believe is, I want to say March, because we actually have a couple positions that we're advertising for at the same time. But we were trying to have a longer window of vacancy, I'm sorry, not a vacancy, of advertisement, to make sure we got a lot of candidates.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good. I just didn't want to miss the opportunity if that was but anticipated. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to approve this agenda? Then I'll go out for public comments as well.
So moved.
Thank you, Dr. Thorpe. Dr. Hawkins, were you the seconder?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, Sean, could you open it up for public comments, please?
Yes, the Q&A window is open again. Anyone wishing to make a public comment, please do so by typing something in there or raising your hand. And again, audio callers, you can raise your hand by pressing *3. First up, we have Hannah Ree.
Black Patients Matter here. Yes, we also approved the agenda, and we have no comments at this time. Thank you.
And next up, we have Rosie Arthurstatter.
Thank you. I just wanted to extend my condolences to Dr. Thorpe. I'm suffering a similar loss myself, and I wasn't able to put this in earlier. So excuse me for being off topic. Thank you.
This time, I do not see any additional requests for comment.
Back to the board, and if there are no further comments or questions, Ms. Caldwell, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Brooks. Ms. Campoverde.
Aye.
Dr. Hawkins.
Yes.
Dr. Helzer.
Yes.
Dr. Kraus.
Yes.
Ms. Lawson.
Yes.
Ms. Lubiano.
Yes.
Yes. Dr. Rue.
Yes.
Dr. Thorpe. Mr. Watkins,
Aye.
Dr. Yip.
Yes.
Thank you.
Please. We will move on to the next agenda item. Agenda item 17, future agenda items. Does anyone have future agenda items they wish to propose?
Stina, do we have a list? Do we have a list still? I know we mentioned several last time, but do we have a list of potential ones?
I
already?
believe that the executive has that list. And in fact, we have some of those items that we already have scheduled for the next meeting. But I don't know off the top of my head which ones those are. Perhaps Mr. Pacifica or somebody could provide additional clarification. I know that we do have one, Ms. Lubiano, I think we communicated with you about offline that will be coming at our next board meeting. But it sounds like you might have some additional agenda items as well. Ms. Lubiano?
Yes, just one, and actually to build on the one I had previously asked, which is about a presentation or summary about, you know, DEI initiatives that we at the board have. You know, how is it interwoven into our programs? You know, for example, with physician outreach, staff training, staff recruiting. I'd like to know more about that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lori, do you all know what that means? DEI?
DEI.
Yes, diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Thank you.
Additional future agenda items?
Well, I think, Madam President, just to clarify, we had stated yesterday that we would have a future agenda item on the reasons for closing cases.
That's right. Thank you very much for reminding me.
Madam President, do we still have on the agenda an item regarding treatment of intractable pain, separate from our previous proposal to talk about, you know, pain management itself, but the idea of chronic and intractable pain, I think, is still, if it hasn't been, I missed the last meeting, so I don't know for sure what happened during that period of discussion, but it sounded like there still could be opportunity for discussion of intractable and chronic pain, and I'd like to see that.
Thank you, Dr. Thorpe. Mr. Pacifica, do you have that down as a?
Well, no, that's an item which we had planned to cover in terms of the task force and updating the controlled guidelines in terms of our public outreach there. But there's no reason it can't be a separate item on the agenda at the next meeting if the board so wants.
Great, thank you.
I mean, presumably, Dr. Thorpe, you would propose that we bring in an external expert.
That's correct. Thanks, Bill.
Well, I mean, we can work with you to find a suitable expert.
Great, thanks. Additional potential agenda items? All right, Sean, could we open it up to the public comment and hear their proposed future agenda items?
Yes, the Q&A window is open there for anyone wishing to make a public comment. Please type something in there or raise your hand and call in users. You can press *3 to raise your hand. First up, we have Virginia. Virginia, sending you a request to open your line.
Time. Miss Lauren would like to do medical records, falsification of medical records, and regulation of plastic surgery. She had to go because she is exhausted from this process. I too want to address falsification of medical records. We've been asking for quite some time about this, and it is really important, along with how the CMA impacts patient safety. None of this legislation is going to pass because of the CMA. If the CMA put this in legislation, it would pass. So we need to address how they impact patient safety. Trauma informed care, and how do we prevent trauma informed care, period, and how do we prevent medical errors from happening in the first place? because a lot can be done if we discuss it and put things in action. We do touch on some preventative things, but we need a focus on prevention. We need a subcommittee on prevention and really focusing on it, because by the time we get to you, our lives are ruined, the doctor's life is ruined, and it's all preventable. Not all, it's mostly preventable. And I think there's something else, but I don't remember. And if butterflies can get $1 million, I'm sure you guys can too. And if we spend $1 billion on trash, you guys can too. If our lives are scattered across the freeway like trash was, they're like, oh my God, this is an issue. They need $1 billion to fix this. But our lives are private, so nobody sees the actual issue. So those are my agenda items. I hope they're heard, and I hope they're really put on there, because I'm really tired of asking every 3 months for them to be addressed and not be addressed. And I also offer condolences to you, Dr. Thorpe. My heart just weeps for you, and I'm very, very sorry that you're going through that. So, and you'll be in my thoughts, and I wish you the best. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Up next, we have Anne Fuqua. I'm sorry. Anne, you should be being prompted to open your line. There you go. Anne, your line is open.
Are you able to hear me?
We can.
Okay, great. My name is Anne Fuqua. I'm a patient advocate, chronic pain patient. To Dr. Thorpe, again, as somebody have expressed, I am so sorry for the loss of your son. I'm not a parent, and I can't begin to imagine what you're going through. And I would just like to thank you for wanting to add the agenda item for intractable pain to the next meeting, and thank the board for their willingness to go into this subject. And that's it.
Thank you for your public comment. Up next, we have Hannah Ree. And you should be getting a prompt to open your line.
Black Patients Matter here. So I was hoping that maybe the medical board would consider an agenda item about something I mentioned previously, an alternate patient complaint resolution pathway. Rather than have this process of HTRU investigation and the California AG's office getting involved, what about utilizing nonprofit organizations who are involved in the mediation process? I mean, the mediation process network in California is already established, it's already out there. And to utilize maybe that service for patients who have complaints, to have them settled in a different manner, it could potentially be very cost effective, more efficient, and offer higher patient satisfaction. So for example, if there's a patient who had some type of issue that went on with the physician, filed a complaint, and all the patient wants to hear is what happened, wants to hear an apology from the physician, and also a hug. Maybe the patient just wants a hug, wants to hear "I'm sorry" from the physician. And so a mediator could get involved for a low-cost fee, maybe $4,000, wait for a period of maybe 6 weeks to get an appointment, and then go to the mediator, sit down with the physician, find out what happened, get the details, and face the physician that had caused the error. And as physicians being human, of course, there would be remorse and tears and apologies. I mean, no physician wants to harm any patients on purpose. Accidents happen, mistakes occur, and so the physician gets the opportunity to hear from the physician himself. That's a valuable experience, which actually, I don't know if that's ever occurred in the state of California. And so then the case would be closed, the physician would be happy, the patient would be
30
happy,
seconds remaining.
satisfied, and have closure. That is all. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your public comment. Next up, we have Rosie.
Thank you. I just want to again offer my condolences to Dr. Thorpe and to build on his request, because I've had that same request for intractable pain to be on the agenda for several years now, and it has not happened. But if there, any good can come out of my son's death, is that it could have been prevented not only with just having him have access to, or any person have access to the reliable pain relief that they were getting. When they took it away, they prescribed an antidepressant. They said, well, you're upset. We'll give you this. So they gave him Prozac. And he had an adverse reaction to Prozac, but it was insidious. And it's because he couldn't metabolize it properly. So I think a part of the key to being successful with anything with intractable pain or any problem in medicine where you're looking at reactions between different medications and polypharmacy is that how it's metabolized is crucial to how successful any treatment is going to be. And if you have a person who can't metabolize something and you're giving them that, then you know, it's a downward spiral. So I think deficiencies in CYP 450, 2D6, 2C9, 2C19, 4A4, whatever. They make these apps that tell doctors, how many pills they can dispense. They can make an app if somebody can't read the chart and look at it and say, oh, gee, these two medications, maybe there's a problem. I think it would solve a lot of problems. It only takes a small problem. It may only be 5% of people who have this problem, but that's a huge problem when it's manifest. So I think that could be crucial in not only chronic or intractable pain, but in medicine in general. Because we have people saying, oh, take all the non-steroid anti-inflammatories you want, because you can take them over the counter and I won't get in trouble. And then you end up with a abdominal aortic aneurysm, or some other problem. So I think we need to look at how the medications are working that are being prescribed for everything. So if that could be put in with that intractable pain, that would be nice. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Up next, we have Michelle Montserrat Ramos. Did you hear in this list, Michelle? Should be seeing the prompt. There you go, Michelle. Line's open.
I'm with Consumer Watchdog. About a year ago, I brought a team with me to discuss the issues with probation and probation monitoring. I've been working with Ms. Jones to provide her information for her presentation. I just want to remind you that a number of board members asked for an update on the issue, but it has not been placed on the agenda yet. Also, there is required reporting as part of the uniform standards for substance abusing healthcare professionals. We would like an update as to how the uniform standards are working. How many minor or major violations have occurred, how many interim suspensions have been ordered, etc. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. At this time, I do not see any additional requests in queue.
All right, we'll bring it back to the board. Do any board members have additional future agenda items? All right, well, yes.
Just a point of personal preference. It's very awkward in this venue because I just wanted people to know that I really truly appreciate their expressions of concern and sympathy, and that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Thorpe. All right, our next agenda item is 18, adjournment. But before I adjourn the meeting, I wanted to again thank Dr. Kraus for his many years of service to the Medical Board of California. We will miss you and your wisdom and your wit in these meetings, but please do stay in touch with all of us. Thank you again, Dr. Kraus. It's been great working with you personally for the past 6 years. I know you've been working with others longer, but we wish you well. And
Thank you, Ms. Lawson. It's an honor to be able to say goodbye twice.
With that, and there being no further business, this meeting of the Medical Board of California is adjourned. Thank you all. And a happy Thanksgiving.